Pyro. When she calls Basil Chaplin, Saxony learns that he runs a secret school for magi. It's the perfect next step for Saxony, and she wants nothing more than to visit Basil's school and learn more. But there's a catch. She has to tell her family what she is, and she has no idea how they're going to take it, especially since someone has started lighting fires in Saltford. Pyro, a fire novella. Chapter 1. Saxony. I turned toward the sound of my mother's voice, my face splitting into a grin. I was engulfed by a lilac-scented cloud as my mom wrapped me up in a hug and squeezed me tight. "Welcome home, sweetheart. How was your flight? Did you sleep?" She released me, and my father swooped in. I reached up on tiptoe to hug my dad.
"We missed you," he said. "Even Yuri missed you."
I laughed. Yuri was Jack's Siamese fighting fish. I slept. Flight was good, I rasped in my now permanently smoky voice. My mom's smile dissolved. "You're sick. Why didn't you tell me you weren't well?" Her warm hands flew to my forehead and face. A line appeared between her brows. "You're feverish." After the one time I had spoken with them, post-tobacco shop fire incident that changed my life forever, I had kept our communication to texts and emails. I knew my mom was going to make a big deal out of my voice. "I feel okay, Mom." Annette Cagney was a mom's mom. She could mother up there with the best of them. There wasn't much I could do about it, except reassure her that I was fine. The thought of actually telling my family the whole story of what had happened to me in Venice made my palms sweat. I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready for that.
"She's probably just jet-lagged, Annette."
My dad put a dry hand to my forehead.
"Oh, you are a bit warm. Let's get you home to bed."
Dad waited for the luggage while Mom got me bundled into our van. She rummaged in her purse and pulled out a package of cough drops. "Here, take one of these. I'll be right back with some tea." "I'm okay, Mom, I promise." The van door slid shut and she jogged across the parking lot as my dad was coming the other way with my luggage piled on a trolley. I heard the two exchange words, and the worry in my mother's voice. I sighed. I felt bad for Mom. There was nothing that could be done to fix my condition. I'd already been down that road. The rear hatch lifted, and my dad put my luggage in the back. "Thanks, Dad." I smiled at him.
"We'll have you home in a jiffy, Saxony. You can go straight to bed."
"I'm really—" The rear hatch closed. "Okay," I finished to no one. Dad opened the driver's side, got in, and started the van.
"So, was Venice everything you thought it would be?"
He drove through the parking lot and waited outside the sliding doors leading to arrivals. "It was more, Dad," I said. "I'd like to go back someday." In fact, I had to go back. I had made a promise to Enzo that I couldn't break. May as well prep my dad for the fact that I'd be heading back to Italy sometime in the future. I didn't know when that call would come. Barely conscious that I was doing it, my hand went to my shirt pocket, feeling for the business card of Basil Chaplin. Whoever he was my connection to the world of fire magi. The sliding doors opened, and Mom appeared carrying a hot tea from the Tim Hortons kiosk in the airport. "It's 29 degrees outside," I said. The last thing I felt like was a hot drink.
"I know, honey," said Dad. "Let your mother mother you. She hasn't been able to all summer."
"I know." My heart swelled as Mom got in and handed me the travel cup. It was nice to be home. I had been too busy and preoccupied to miss my parents much while I was gone, but now that I was back, I missed them terribly. Funny how that worked. "Thanks, Mom." "Careful, Tim's always pours their water too hot." 97 degrees to be precise, I thought, sensing the temperature as my palms pressed against the paper cup. As we drove home, my parents asked questions about Venice and the Baseggios, my host family. I showed them photos on my phone of Piazza San Marco, the Grand Canal, water taxis and yachts, the beaches on Lido, and the canals at night with the moon high above lines of crisscrossing laundry. As my mom flipped through my photos, I watched the suburbs of Saltford go by. My neighborhood hadn't changed, yet somehow it looked completely different. The manicured lawns, similar two-story houses painted in shades of pastels and grays, kids running through a sprinkler with a dog yapping at their heels. It all felt so safe and domestic in comparison to Venice. "Which one is this, honey?" Mom held my phone up so I could see the image of Izia I'd taken near the beginning of the summer. "Is this Christian?" "No, Cristiano is the older one. That's Izia." My heart gave a happy little ache at the image of the pale, black-eyed little boy. Early on, I'd taken a shot of him building a plane out of Lego on the floor in his room. He wasn't smiling, and he had those awful purple smudges under his eyes. Tears pricked behind my eyelids at the thought of how much he'd been suffering at that point in time. "Goodness, he doesn't look well," Mum said, zooming in on his face. "How old did you say he was?" 6. She gave a little gasp and made a tisk sound. "He doesn't look a day over 4. He wasn't feeling all that well when I first got there, but..." I took the phone and flipped forward to the shot I'd taken of all of the Paseggios at the airport in Venice. "He was much better by the end of the summer. See?" While still small for his age, in this image, Izia was grinning, tanned, and noticeably healthier. His eyes had lost the haunted look. She took the phone. "Wow, he doesn't even look like the same child." The van swerved a little and Mum said, "Keep your eyes on the road, James." My dad grunted and quit trying to peer over her shoulder. "What was wrong with him?" she asked. "They weren't too sure," I said. It wasn't a lie. What was wrong with him is now wrong with me, I thought. And yet, the thought didn't make me as unhappy as it used to. Probably because I didn't feel like the fire inside was roasting me alive anymore. Mum handed my phone back to me. "Are you going to see the girls this week? Are they all back?" "Not yet. Georgie has been back for a while. Her mom got sick, so she came home early. But her mom's a lot better now. We're going to have a sleepover at Georgie's soon, if that's okay." "Of course, as long as you're well. You'll have a lot of catching up to do with your friends." Mum gave me one of those "we'll see" looks from between the seats. My stomach dropped. My voice was never going to go back to normal, and my temperature would probably always run a bit higher than it should. I hoped Mum would get accustomed to my new normal by the time the sleepover came around. We pulled into the driveway of our gray 2-story and parked in front of the garage. Dad wouldn't let me carry any of my luggage in. Go on," he said. "The boys can't wait to see you. RJ has soccer practice, so you'd better say hi before he leaves." "And then straight to bed," Mum called as I opened the front door to my home. The smell of freshly baked banana bread hit me in the face and made my mouth water. "RJ?" I called, kicking off my sneakers. "Sax?" His voice came from the garage. My older brother knew I hated being called Sax. I pursed my lips and didn't answer. I heard him laughing. "Saxony?" he called again. The door to the garage opened, and the smell of banana bread was ruined with the smell of oil. "You're taller," I said when he stepped up into our foyer. "How is that possible?" My older brother had been 6 feet tall already. Now he had to be pushing 6'1" or 6'2". "Yeah? Maybe." He didn't even notice my voice, but I had guessed he wouldn't. RJ was blind to details like that. If it wasn't a detail on his car, it wasn't a detail he paid attention to. If RJ had ever had a girlfriend, he'd kept it on the down low. RJ and I used to bicker a lot, but we'd grown out of it and a friendship had formed. One day I might broach the subject of girls with him, if I thought he might answer me seriously. RJ was wearing a blue mechanic's jumpsuit with the arms tied at the waist and a stained white tank top. He pulled me into a hug, which was more like a hard chest bounce accompanied by a loud back slap. RJ had started lifting weights a couple years ago, and he'd grown in every direction since then. He already outweighed my dad, and he wasn't quite 19 yet. "Watch the threads," I teased, looking down at myself for oil stains. I wrinkled my nose at the scent of vehicle fluids and sweat. "You stink. What are you doing?" "Installing nitrous." He grinned and ran a hand through his dark brown hair. RJ was difficult to offend, unlike Jack, who was the most sensitive of all of us. RJ hit me on the shoulder with the back of a dirty hand, a brotherly love tap. "Hey, how is Italy?" He peeled off the jumpsuit. "Game changer?" This was how RJ talked. Sports analogies and slang he picked up who knew where. Maybe the salt mine. I laughed at his choice of words. He had no idea just how much of a game changer it was. "It was awesome. You should go." "Yeah, the Ferrari factory isn't far from Venice, actually." He wiggled his dark brows. "That'd be worth a visit." I shook my head at him. Still a one-track mind. You've got practice right now?
In a half hour. Game against the Vikings in 2 days. It's been a hell of a season. You gonna come?
He threw the jumpsuit into the garage where it landed on a spare tire near his Corvette. He shut the garage door. RJ had taken over the garage when he bought his first car 2 years ago. I think my dad didn't know whether to feel annoyed or proud. RJ got a job at the salt mine just outside of town when he was in 10th grade, and he'd worked there ever since. He saved part of his earnings for uni and spent the rest on his car. The mine paid well, and his smarts got him promoted to a cushy job in the admin office.
Course, I said.
Where's Jack? RJ shrugged a muscled shoulder.
Probably in his room playing video games. I'll catch you after practice.
He headed down into the basement where his man cave was. Mom and Dad came into the foyer laden with bags just as Jack appeared at the top of the stairs.
Hey, Saxony.
Jack's face brightened.
You're home.
My younger brother's voice caught me up in a pause. It was completely different from the last time I'd heard it. It was deeper, more resonant.
Yep. Dude, you sound like a man or something. I smiled up at him. How was your summer?
Jack came down the stairs. His blonde hair was messy and shaggy, and he looked like he'd grown at least a full inch. Unlike RJ, Jack was all elbows and legs.
Your voice sounds weird. Are you sick?
No, I'm fine, I said, just a bit tired. Jack's face went through a startling transformation by the time he reached the bottom of the stairs. His blue eyes locked on mine and his smile disappeared. His chin jerked back just a little, as though someone had taken a swipe at his face. He stopped at the bottom, but came no closer.
What, no hug? I teased.
But I suddenly felt uncomfortable, like he just looked right through me and saw something he didn't like. My forearms prickled. Jack gave me a swift, stiff hug and pulled away fast. I got the mental image of a porcupine as he turned and headed back upstairs. He shot me an unpleasant look over his shoulder, one I couldn't define. Like all siblings, Jack and I had had our differences, but he'd never given me a look like that. Not even after I'd hurt him in the spring. I had thought he was over that. After all, he was the one who fessed up that he'd been torturing me, and he convinced my parents to let me go to Venice when they were ready to cancel the whole thing.
That was weird, I muttered, watching Jack retreat.
He's probably just picking up on you not feeling well, Mom said. You know how good he is at picking up on other people's feelings and emotions.
Is he?
I looked at my mom with surprise. It wasn't something I'd ever noticed specifically about Jack.
He seems to be lately, murmured my father.
He squeezed by me with my biggest piece of luggage. I grabbed my carry-on and my purse and followed him up the steps.
I'll be up shortly with the thermometer,
my mom called up the stairs.
Great, I said under my breath.
Let her mother you, Dad said again. She's missed you. Here we are,
he grunted as he set my luggage down on my cream-colored carpet.
Just as you left it. Welcome home, sweetheart.
He kissed my cheek.
Mom's got a turkey for dinner tonight. Try and get some rest.
Thanks, Dad.
I gave him a hug and he left me alone with my unpacking. Nothing in my room had changed, but everything looked different. The blue walls and gray trim looked terribly wrong, not like me at all. They were the old Saxony. I had just painted my walls 1 year ago. I wondered what my parents would think of me painting again. Maybe orange or burgundy. I took a black business card with the red foil out of my pocket and looked at it, chewing my lip. My stomach did a little dip at the thought of calling the number. Enzo had suggested I spend a little time with Basil before he would allow me to fulfill my debt. How much time? Doing what? Presumably he was going to teach me all about being a fire magus. But where was he? I guess that a little time didn't mean a weekend. I pulled out my cell phone and connected it to our Wi-Fi. I looked up the country code on the front of the phone number. +44. England. Well, at least we spoke the same language. I put the card up on my bulletin board, which was full of photos of me and my friends. Akiko, Georgie, and Targa goofing off at the beach, sleepovers at Georgie's house, making watermelon slushes and exploding pink melon all over the kitchen. I smiled wistfully. These were the times of a kid. I didn't feel so much like a kid anymore. The black card stood out starkly against my pastel photo frames and sparkly stickers. I really needed to redecorate. My ears perked at the sound of footsteps on the stairs. I could tell my mom from my dad in a dead sleep. That was my mom.
and she was coming armed with a thermometer. I panicked, snatched the black card off the bulletin board and stuffed it into the top drawer of my dresser. I plastered what I hoped was a normal-looking expression on my face and turned to face my mom as she came in. Later, when I was alone in the house and had screwed up enough courage, I would call him. I couldn't afford to have anyone interrupt or overhear this particular conversation. Chapter 2. I was still rubbing sleep out of my eyes when I came down the stairs the next morning. The smell of bacon, cinnamon, and maple syrup filled the kitchen. Mum was standing at our picture window and looking out at the huge park behind our house. Dad was flipping the French toast.
How did you sleep?
Asked Dad.
Still on Italian time?
He bent to check the tray of bacon sizzling in the oven. My mouth began to water and my stomach growled so loud I could feel it. I slept hard, I croaked, like I was getting paid for it. My jaw cracked as I yawned. I had fallen into a deep and dreamless stupor fueled by jet lag and turkey. Mum had made a feast to celebrate my coming home. Dinner was nice, but it would have been nicer if Jack hadn't kept glaring at me from across the table. I hoped today he'd be over whatever funk he was in.
Good. You needed it,
Mum said, turning back to the view. I poured myself a coffee and went to stand beside her. The view behind our house was of Swallowtail Park, a large stretch of land that had once been owned by a farmer named Rudolph McLeach. When McLeach died, the land passed to his only daughter, and she'd sold it to the city. By that time, the green space was beloved by Saltford. It was never developed. McLeach's old farmhouse and barn were now boarded up, and the forest continued to grow in around them. The crooked weather vane on the old barn could still be seen from our picture window, poking up through the canopy of trees. It was more the sight of that old weather vane than anything else that made me feel like I was home. Mum put a hand to my forehead, frowning.
Your temperature is only a little above normal, but it's clear you're fighting something.
She shook her head.
It's that recycled plain air. Nothing will make you sick as fast as breathing the vermin of 120 other people for 8 hours or more.
Ew, gross. I made a face. I'm fine, I promise.
You still sound terrible, she said. I might make an appointment with Dr. Jacques for you.
Please don't do that. My stomach did a little flip. I feel perfect.
Better to be on the safe side, honey.
Dad pulled the sizzling bacon out of the oven and set it on the stovetop. The idea of going to see a doctor had never been pleasant, but my stomach twisted with nerves when I thought about going now that I was a full-on fire magus. What if Dr. Jacques noticed something off about me? I pressed my mouth shut. As far as I could tell, except for my eyes, and they were under control now, my physical changes were all internal, and they were clearly of a supernatural nature. I had to hope that there was nothing so different about me that I could never see a healthcare professional ever again. I could deal with cuts and abrasions easily by cauterizing them from the inside, but what if I broke a bone? Maybe it was better to face the music and see what the doc said, because at least then I'd know sooner rather than later. Our small kitchen television was on, and my dad was watching the stock report as he made juice. He worked as an investor at one of the bigger banks in town.
Tune into the news, please, honey, Mom said. It's 9 o'clock.
My dad picked up the remote and flicked it to our local channel. Jack came down the stairs, mumbled a good morning to no one in particular, sat down at the table and started playing on his phone. His hair stuck up in every direction like a yellow aloe vera plant. "Morning, Jack," I said pointedly. He grunted. "Where's RJ?" I asked.
"We're letting him sleep in a bit these days," explained Mom. "He's been playing hours of soccer every day after work. He's more tired than usual."
A wooden play structure in Centennial Park was lit on fire last night, along with a section of nearby trees, said the news anchor from the television. We go now to Knott's Landing Community, where Daniel McGregor is on site.
We all turned to watch the report. The image showed a smoldering bunch of blackened logs and melted plastic goo. Smoke lay in a dark haze over the wreckage behind the reporter. McGregor had a grim expression on his face, like he was reporting a homicide. These kinds of things didn't often happen in Saltford.
The fire department has determined the incident was arson, and the police have already begun an investigation to find those responsible.
My mom set the platter of French toast on the table and turned toward the screen with her fists on her hips.
"Who would do such a thing?"
The indignation on her face made me bite my cheeks to keep from smiling. "Shh," Dad said, putting a hand out. his brows drawn together. I started to laugh, but Dad gave me a look that silenced me. Someone lit some jungle gym on fire, and the adults in Saltford didn't know what to do with themselves. Before Venice, I might have been just as horrified, but after being locked in a cell to burn to death at the hands of a megalomaniac, arson that didn't actually hurt anyone seemed mild and petty. I was going to have to readjust my worldview back to a small-town level. I caught Jack's glare, and my thoughts skittered to a halt. He was drilling me with his eyes from across the table like I'd shot someone's dog. "What?" I asked, genuinely confused. Maybe I shouldn't make light of a burnt swing set, but the nasty look he was giving me was overkill. Jack just shook his head and dropped his gaze back to his phone. "We've never had anything like this happen in our neighborhood before," said a community woman with the microphone in her face. "Whoever is responsible needs to be stopped before they hurt someone." "It's probably the rugby team from Hudson Senior High," I suggested. One of the high schools across town, rivals of Saltford High, had sports teams which were notorious for acts of vandalism. Things like sheds and doghouses turned up destroyed sometimes, particularly after a losing streak. I caught Jack rolling his eyes as he forked 3 pieces of French toast onto his plate. "What's your problem?" I snapped at him. Guys, said Dad, palms up. Saxony's been back for 1 day. Can we try and get along for at least 24 hours before we start biting each other's heads off?" "Sorry," I mumbled. Dad poured the juice and set a cup in front of each plate. He looked at my mom. "I thought we were past this. Don't the books say teenagers are supposed to get easier?" Mom gave him an intense side-eye that said she didn't know which books he was reading. "Saxony's not feeling well. We're all grumpy when we're sick. Honestly, I feel totally fine." I felt like a broken record. The news broadcast about the fire was still going on in the background. "This type of behavior is just simply not acceptable in a town like Saltford," another neighbor was saying. "Everybody knows everybody, and I hope that whoever did this doesn't think they can get away with it." "Sweetheart, would you mind turning that off?" Mom said. Dad leaned back to snap off the TV. I paused with my orange juice halfway to my lips as I watched Jack shove a whole piece of French toast into his mouth and chew, cheeks bulging like a tuba player. "Wow, did they not feed you while I was away? You know that no one is going to take it away from you, right?" I said lightly. I was trying to ease the tension between us. Jack pushed his empty plate away and stood up abruptly. "I'm done here," he said with his mouth full and with another glare at me. He swallowed the barely chewed food. It must have hurt. "Can I go?" His lip curled with disgust. His expression was more than simple annoyance with a sibling. I blinked, stung, as he vacated the table without waiting for a response from anyone. I set down my orange juice, locked my jaw, and went after him. I sprinted up the stairs and caught him in the hallway between our 2 bedrooms. Jack and I were the only ones with bedrooms on the upper floor. I grabbed his elbow and turned him toward me, trying to keep my voice steady. My temper was far more under control since my experience in Venice, but I still had my limits. "What did I do to you, Jack? I don't get it." His eyes flashed as he faced me, and I took a step back. "I know you lit that fire last night," he hissed so our parents couldn't hear. "I don't know what happened to you in Venice, but I don't even recognize you anymore." A rat began to gnaw through my insides. My heart began its powerful thud. But this was not like facing Dante. This was my family, not some bully I would never see again. Surprise froze my tongue into place. Everyone who knew I was a fire magus wasn't even on the same continent as me. There was no way Jack could know anything. I shook off the spell and opened my mouth to protest, but I took too long. "See, you can't even deny it," Jack said. "Jack, I don't know what you're talking about," I stumbled through the words. I sounded guilty even to myself, but only because he'd taken me so off guard. "I was in bed, sleeping like the dead all night last night. Why do you think I set that stupid little fire? I would never—" "Save it," he seethed. Jack's boyish face had been transformed by righteous fury. He didn't recognize me? Who was this guy? He disappeared into his bedroom and shut the door in my face. I felt like he'd gutted me with a fish knife. I knocked. "Jack, I had nothing to do with that fire. I promise you."
"What's going on up there?" Dad said from the bottom of the stairs. "Are you going to come finish breakfast?"
"I've lost my appetite," I said loud enough so that Jack could hear it through his door. I headed to my bedroom. "Let them go," I heard Mum say from the table.
Saxony isn't well and Jack's just in a funk because RJ is getting all the attention lately. They'll sort themselves out."
Ugh,
My dad groaned.
teenagers.
Chapter 3. "Another one?" I heard my mom cry from the kitchen the next morning, a Monday. Mom and Dad both had work today. "Another what?" I asked as I turned the corner into the kitchen. My parents were huddled in front of the television. Dad looked over his shoulder at me.
Another fire last night. This one was in the harbor.
"Not the sea dog, I hope." I peered in between their shoulders. It wouldn't be fair for something like that to happen to Phil, not after he already lost everything in the flood. Phil was the owner of a restaurant that looked like a pirate ship. Targa's dad helped to build it way back before we'd been born. It was beloved by the locals as much as it was by the tourists. "It wasn't the sea dog," said Mom. "But it wasn't some cheap little dinghy either." She moved away from the screen to let me see. The same reporter as the day before was standing on the beach. Behind him, the smoking wreckage of a small yacht lay half out of the water, encircled by caution tape.
Police are unsure if the perpetrator or perpetrators are the same as the ones who lit the jungle gym yesterday, the reporter was saying. Police urge anyone who might know something to contact them.
Mom took a swig of her coffee and put her mug into the sink. "Saltford is getting too big. We should think about moving to Devon." Devon was a nearby town of 6,000 people. It was backwater compared to Saltford's 180,000.
"Gotta run,"
Dad said, kissing her cheek.
"And I know you don't mean that."
He looked at me.
"Feeling better?"
"I never felt bad," I intoned. Just then Jack came down the stairs. His eyes fell on the screen and widened. "You have an appointment with Dr. Jacques this afternoon at 3, my mom said as she went to the foyer and towed her way into a pair of black ballet flats. "Don't forget. Are you okay going alone or do you want me to come with you? I could meet you there." "No, it's fine," I said. "He's just going to tell me to drink liquids and sleep it off." "There is something going on or you wouldn't sound like Leonard Cohen," Mom said, dropping her chin. There was no point in arguing with her. My parents said goodbye and left in the van. The real estate office where Mom worked was on the way to Dad's bank, so he always dropped her off and picked her up. Jack mumbled something from the kitchen, and I went to find him, bracing myself for more freaky accusations. "What did you say, Jack?"
"I said."
He turned to face me, his face a storm cloud.
"How did you do it?"
"How did I do what?" My eyes fell on the television screen just as the image of the burning yacht disappeared, and they cut to a commercial. A stone of dread dropped into my gut. "You don't think that I had anything to do with that?"
"I know you did," he said.
The certainty on his face made even my blood feel cold. "How do you know?" I cried, my hands out in surrender. "Why are you so convinced that I've been running around late at night setting fire to things that aren't mine? It's crazy."
"I agree. It is crazy," he said. "Consider yourself caught, Saxony. I can't prove it, but I know it was you. You need to stop this." He pointed at the television screen. "And you need to get help."
"Whoa," I said.
The kitchen seemed to spin and blur in my periphery. It was giving me vertigo to hear these things come out of my little brother's mouth.
"You're messing with me, right? You're still mad about what happened before I left for Venice, and you're having some fun screwing with me."
But even as I was looking into his eyes, I knew that it wasn't the case. There were no cracks in his conviction. I knew my little brother. I could recognize the signs of a practical joke. There was something else going on here, something Jack needed to explain. He stormed past me.
"I can't even look at you,"
he said under his breath. A panicked bird flapped in my chest, and I grabbed at his elbow as he left the kitchen.
"Jack," I said, my voice cracking, "I don't understand. Just stay and talk to me."
He yanked his elbow out of my grasp.
"I can't talk to a liar. I can't believe a word you say anymore."
He shoved his feet into his skateboard shoes in the foyer, and without a last look, he was gone. I sat down hard into a chair at the dining room table, confused, stung. Like most services in our community, Dr. Jacques' office was not far away. In the afternoon, I retrieved my town bike from the garage, strapped my purse across my body, and headed out for my appointment. Summer was still evident in the green leaves on the trees and freshly cut grass, but there was a coolness in the air, a warning that snow was not all that far away. But it wasn't the weather that was on my mind. For the first time since my transformation, I was going to be examined by a health professional. What would he find? Besides a temperature that ran slightly too high, what else might give me away? Would he notice something strange about my eyes? When he looked down my throat, would he see flickering flames? Visions of a balding man in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck running screaming from an examination room scampered through my imagination. I wondered if I could get away with skipping this appointment and my mother not finding out. But Annette Cagney was a sleuth, especially when it came to her children. I had no choice but to go through with it, and I had to admit that I was a bit curious myself. I jammed the front tire into the bike rack and crossed the parking lot toward the clinic. I got myself checked in, and the nurse showed me to a private examination room. I sat in one of the chairs, wrapping and unwrapping my headphone cord around my phone, inner tension mounting. The wait seemed to stretch out for hours, and just as I had convinced myself that this was a terrible idea and got up to sneak out, the door opened and Dr. Jacques came in. He was a slender, balding man with glasses. He'd been my doctor since I was born.
"How is my favorite redhead?" Dr. Jacques said, as he closed the door. "Your mom said you haven't been feeling well?"
"Actually, I feel completely fine," I said. "My voice has just gone a bit scratchy, and that has my mom's alarm bells going off."
"Yes, you do sound like you have something going on with your throat or chest," he said. "Pop up on the bench, and let's take a look."
I sat down on the examination table, and the paper they covered it with crinkled under my butt. Beetles of worry crawled up and down my spine. I took a deep breath.
"Open wide for me, please,"
Dr. Jacques said with a small penlight in hand. My jaw creaked as I opened. He looked for a long time. I watched his brow for signs of concern or alarm.
"Huh," he said. "Is your throat sore?"
I grunted. Dr. Jacques pulled back and I closed my mouth. He hadn't run from the room screaming, so that was good. At least he hadn't run away yet. He turned and picked up a thermometer and stuck the silver end into my ear. I heard it click, and a moment later it beeped, and he pulled it back and looked at the digital reading.
"Well, you are running a touch above normal," he observed, "but it's nothing to get too worked up about."
He went about listening to my heart and my lungs, asking me to breathe deeply in and out. The routine was familiar and helped to calm me. He asked me if I had noticed any changes in weight, how I was sleeping, how I was eating and digesting, and if anything had changed suddenly in my life. I told him I'd spent the summer in Venice and my diet had changed, but that was it. I kept my eyes on the floor while I downplayed my answers. He felt my glands with warm fingertips and inspected my eyes with a light. "What's the diagnosis, Doc?" I finally asked, lightly.
"Well," he said, peering at me from over his glasses, "if your throat isn't actually hurting you, then I'm a bit mystified as to why your voice sounds so scratchy. And the fact that you're running a low-level fever is a sign that your body is fighting something. I'm hesitant to prescribe antibiotics at this stage, though I would consider it if your fever went up. Nothing else seems to be abnormal, although looking down your throat proved to be more difficult than it might be for most."
"Why is that?" I asked, twisting my hair into a rope just to give my hand something to do.
"Well, it's very dark in there. Perhaps you have a narrower esophagus than most. Funny, it's not something I remember about you,"
he murmured, pushing his glasses up his nose. His comment triggered something I'd imagined after my burning, that my insides were now like volcanic rock, black and hard. I didn't think that was actually what I looked like on the inside, but it sort of felt that way.
"I recommend you get plenty of fluids and plenty of rest. Don't do anything to excite yourself, and we'll just keep an eye on that fever, shall we?"
"Okay." I hopped down. "Are we finished?" Dr. Jacques picked up his clipboard and put a hand on the door handle.
"For now. I'll give your mother a call this afternoon and tell her not to fret."
I breathed an enormous sigh of relief. "Thank you." As I biked home, I mulled the physical over. A trained professional couldn't see anything much different other than small things about me, even a trained professional who had known me since I was born. So why was it that Jack was reacting so strongly to me? Chapter 4. The smell of fresh-cut grass, popcorn, and hot dogs filled the air as we entered the soccer stadium and found our way to our seats. It was already the second half of the game, and my brother's team had the championship all locked up. The stands were buzzing with students and parents, and the Archers' supporters were easy to recognize. They were in high spirits. The sounds of whistles and screams filled the air. Spectators had taken to foot-pounding on the aluminum stands whenever a goal was scored, which filled the space with a sound of metallic thunder. Jack refused to sit by me and chose instead to sit on the other side of my parents. It was difficult to enjoy the game with his words and behavior weighing so heavily on my mind. Was it just a coincidence that I had transformed into a fire magus and suddenly my little brother was accusing me of arson? What did he know? And why was he so unwilling to talk to me about it? "You're going to break those if you don't give it a rest," my mom said, tilting her eyes down to where I was wrapping and unwrapping my headphone cord around my phone. "Something bothering you?" I sighed. It was so difficult for me to hide anything from my family. Akiko always said I was like an open book and had recommended that I never lie about anything really important. "No, all good here," I said to my mom as I stuffed the headphone cord into my pocket. Everyone in the stands leapt to their feet and began screaming and clapping and stomping as RJ's team, the Archers, scored another goal. My dad leaned toward my mom and said,
"It's embarrassing. I feel sorry for the other team."
My mom smiled and said over the din, "Life is competition. It's good for them to lose."
"Isn't it important for our own son to have that experience too?" Dad replied.
Mom tossed her auburn hair. "It's a soccer game, honey. Let's not get too philosophical." In my periphery, I caught a face off to the right, which seemed to be watching me. I turned my head to spot a guy with dirty blonde hair and high cheekbones. We made eye contact, and I expected him to glance away, but he didn't. I held his gaze. I was never the first to look away in a stare-down with a cute guy. His face broke out in a broad grin. He still didn't look away. My heart beat a little faster. I didn't recognize him from Saltford High, but he couldn't have been that much older than me. He must have been from one of the other high schools in town. Throughout the rest of the soccer match, he and I played the eye contact game. I'd catch him looking at me, and he'd catch me looking at him, until finally we both started laughing at the obvious. He couldn't have made it clearer that he was interested, and I couldn't have made it clearer that I was open to his interest. A memory of the first time I'd met Dante rose to mind, and I frowned. I'd been so taken with him, and he had proven to be a jerk. It was a lesson I had needed to learn, and I could admit that now. Cute boys were great. I was all about them. But maybe I wouldn't be so eager to rush headlong into dating without weighing the guy a little more carefully. The game wrapped up just as the sun was going down, with a score of 6-2. We shuffled out of the stadium along with the crowd and stood in the parking lot to wait for RJ so we could congratulate him before he left to celebrate with his team. I stepped into the ladies' washroom, telling my family I'd be along in a minute. As I came out of the washroom, the blonde guy was standing near the white brick walls, clearly waiting for me. My face flushed as soon as I saw him. It was easy to be brave and hold eye contact with someone when you're stuck in the middle of a crowd. But when you come face to face, things get a little more awkward. He was even cuter close up, with a broad mouth and naturally red lips. He gave me that same grin and propped a shoulder against the wall. "My guess is that you've got a boyfriend in the game," he said, cocking an eyebrow. "Please tell me I'm wrong." "A brother, not a boyfriend," I said, smiling. "A protective brother?" He made a show of glancing around with fake nervousness. I laughed. "Why? Do you have wicked intentions?" "If taking a gorgeous redhead out for coffee is wicked," he put his hands up, "then guilty as charged." My tummy warmed with pleasure, and I hated myself for being so vulnerable to flattery. "Why don't we start with, 'Hi, my name is Saxony.'" "Gage," he replied. "Pleased to meet you. I hope I wasn't creeping you out by staring. That wasn't my intention. There's just—" His eyelids lowered as he murmured, "Something so attractive about you." This guy was laying it on thick. I cleared my throat. "Do you have a friend in the game?" "Several." He cocked his head to the side. "My guess is you're a senior at Salford High? Half of the Archers are from that school. I'm friends with Danny Fair and Jordan Bell." "Oh, yeah? Jordan was in my poli-sci class last year." I relaxed as I identified the links between us. I didn't know them well, but Danny and Jordan were on RJ's soccer team. "You must be in your last year, too?" He shook his head. "I graduated this past year. I'm going to do some traveling this year. I just got back from spending the summer in Italy. I highly recommend it." He took a step closer. "Really? I'd like to hear more about that. When can I take you out?" I opened my mouth to respond when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Jack was there with his now customary black look. "Mom and Dad are looking for you," he said flatly. I better not keep you, Gage said. Maybe I could be lucky enough to get your number?
Oh, you'll want to steer clear of this one, Jack said while examining his fingernails. It's for your own good. No one likes to date a liar.
And with that, my little brother spun around and stalked away. Jack! I cried, horrified. I turned back to Gage, my face flushed with heat. I'm sorry, I don't know what's gotten into him. Ever since I got back from Venice, he's been acting weird.
It's okay. I have a brother too. I know what it's like.
He shifted from one foot to the other and stuffed his hands in his pockets.
So, do I have an answer?
Coffee would be nice, I said, retrieving my phone from my bag.
We exchanged numbers and he flashed me that breathtaking grin. Awesome. I'll give you a call later. Nice to meet you, Saxony.
He turned and walked away, and I watched him for a few seconds, admiring his confident stride. I frowned as Jack's words came back to me. I scanned the parking lot for my parents, who were standing by our van along with RJ and Jack, celebrating the Archers' victory. I didn't want to ruin this moment for RJ, but I felt like I'd been slapped. I stared at Jack until he finally looked at me. I beckoned to him to meet me on the grass behind all the cars. At first he shook his head, and I put my palms together in a pleading gesture. He rolled his eyes and ambled toward the grass. I stalked in his direction, my jaw set. Chapter 5. You have to talk to me, Jack, I said, my voice serious. Why would you humiliate me like that?
You've already humiliated yourself, he answered, crossing long, skinny arms over his chest. Shaking his head, he said, If Mom and Dad knew. What happened to you in Venice?
My stomach dropped into my bowels.
What makes you think something happened to me in Venice?
Why was my voice so squeaky?
Because I don't recognize you as my sister anymore, he said. You used to have such a good heart, always helping people. His face was a mask of disgust. Now you hurt people.
I'm not hurting anybody, Jack, I said, incredulous. I wouldn't.
You already have. I'm going to give you a day to fess up to Mom and Dad before I go to them myself.
Jack.
I took a calming breath.
You have absolutely no proof that I had anything to do with those fires. I have done nothing since I got home but sleep and eat pancakes and turkey. I have absolutely no reason, no motive whatsoever to go running around town setting fire to things.
No, he admitted. I don't have any actual proof, but I know it was you all the same.
My fists clenched. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be falsely accused? Especially by someone who knows you, who has grown up alongside you? My voice hardened. We stared each other down. He narrowed his eyes, not giving me any quarter.
Saxony? Jack? Dad called across the parking lot. Come and say congratulations to RJ before he heads off.
One day, Jack warned, and turned away. I followed him, my insides writhing. I felt mute in the presence of such injustice. The width and breadth of it hit me like an anvil to the chest. We reached the rest of our family, clustered around the van. I arranged my face into an expression of happiness and pride for RJ's sake. Awesome job, bro, I said.
Thanks, Sax,
he said, grinning. His hair was freshly washed and curly, his clothing already damp with sweat. You going to get into all kinds of trouble tonight? I teased.
I certainly hope not, said Mom. They're going to celebrate their win like fine upstanding young citizens and be home in bed by 1. Right, sweetie?
She gave my brother a saccharine smile. RJ puffed his cheeks out with an exhale, like her ask was a steep one. I noticed he didn't directly answer her, though. Instead, he gave me a curious look.
Hey, is your friend Georgina back in town yet?
My eyebrows shot up. RJ had never shown interest in any of my friends before. I think so, but her mom's been sick lately, so I haven't seen her yet. A sly smile crossed my face. Why? RJ shrugged and gave a sheepish grin. Even I could admit, when he smiled, my older brother was charming enough to stop a striking clock.
She's cute.
He grabbed a baseball cap from his bag in the back of the open van and placed it over his damp curls. I grimaced. No, I didn't want to know about my brother thinking about my friend like that.
Gotta go, my man.
RJ put out a fist to Jack and bumped his knuckles.
Don't strain on her.
With these words, RJ tilted his head slightly in my direction. I couldn't have been more surprised if RJ had started levitating. Even my oblivious older brother had noticed that Jack was clashing with me. I watched Jack's reaction to this request. His expression became stone cold at the suggestion of giving me a break.
Come on, Jack, RJ sighed. You bland out when you don't punch back.
My dad looked at my mom.
Do you have any idea what's going on here?
She shook her head, bemused.
They'll sort it out, said RJ. Thanks for coming to my game, guys. Catch you later.
He took off toward a crowd of his teammates loitering near the stadium entrance.
Who will sort what out? Asked Dad.
Jack refused to meet my gaze. We piled into the van and headed for home just as the sky transformed from bright blue to gunmetal gray. On the way home, my gaze traveled up to the distant hilltop community of Bella Vista, where my friend Georgiana lived. I pulled out my phone and pounded out a text. Me. Hey, Georgie, how's your mom doing? Everything okay? Georgie. Hey, thanks for checking in. She'll be fine. Funny, but her illness has actually brought us closer together. I smiled and typed, I think they call that a silver lining. That's awesome, Georgie. Georgie. Yeah, it is. We're not best chums or anything, but things are definitely better. I'll tell you more when we're all together. Me. Can't wait. As we entered the foyer to our house, my phone chirped again. I dug it out of my bag and was pleasantly surprised to find a text from Raph.
Buongiorno, Bella. How are things going with your family? Care to talk?
My heart melted with appreciation. I needed a sympathetic ear and one who understood my situation. That left only Elda or Raph. Elda was busy raising her family and fixing her marriage. Raph's text felt like a godsend. I sprinted up the steps to my bedroom, closed the door, and dialed him. I took several gulps of water from my water bottle as the long dashes of an overseas call sounded off in my ear.
That was fast, answered Raph in his rich Italian accent.
I guess that's a yes. Lucky me. How was your flight home? How are you?
To my brief horror, my lower lip wobbled. I sucked in a deep breath and blew it out slowly through pursed lips. A sympathetic ear always brought emotions rushing to the forefront. I could go along pretending everything was okay for a long time, but if someone asked, "Hey, are you okay?" in a sincerely concerned tone, I had to fight not to fall to pieces. I sat on my bed and pulled my feet up. My mom is convinced I have the plague, I said with a laugh.
Because of your voice?
Yeah, she thinks I'm sick. I knew she would. I scooted backward so my back was against the wall and crossed my legs out in front of me. I had an appointment with my doctor.
Oh, Dio. Could he tell?
Nope. I was sweating bullets, but he just said that my esophagus seemed narrower than usual and I have a slight fever. Nothing more. Raph gave an audible sigh of relief.
Any pain?
None, thank goodness, I said. My days of constant agony appear to be over. My lips twisted in a wry smile. I still haven't gotten to the point where I'm thanking Dante. I don't think I ever will. Raph laughed.
What's bothering you then?
I smiled. Raph was so astute. At least I didn't have to hide my real self with him. Somebody has been lighting fires in Saltford, I said, and my little brother is convinced that it's me. There was a pause. Then,
but he doesn't know, right? So why would he think that?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, I answered. He has no proof, and yet he's fully convinced that I'm guilty. As if I have any interest in starting random fires in my own hometown, or anywhere for that matter. My face heated with indignation. Raph was quiet for a moment, and then said,
How did he react to you when you first got home?
Not good. It was fishy from the start. I remembered the strange transformation on Jack's face as he came down the stairs. It's like he knows something happened to me, but I don't know why he's linking it to the fires. Don't you find that colossally weird? Raph took a breath.
You know, I have an aunt that can sense things about people. If I'm feeling upset for some reason and she's around, she can pick up on my emotion, even if I'm trying to hide it. There is a word for it, but I can't think of what it would be in English.
Are you suggesting that Jack is like that? I thought about this. My little brother has always been sensitive, but not in a psychic way.
An empath, said Raph. That's what it's called. Maybe you should just confront him, ask him if he can sense something strange that he never noticed before he went to Venice.
I feel like I've already done that, but he won't answer me. Not directly, anyway. Feeling like a conversation hog, I added, but enough about me. How are you?
Raph laughed. My life is not nearly as interesting as yours, Saxony. I make glass plates and bowls. I hang out with my friends. I sleep. I repeat.
Have you seen Dante?
Not even his shadow. But that's normal for me.
And Federica?
She's around, but it's like she's afraid of everything now. It's kind of sad.
I frowned. Federica needed to get away from the Barberini family, at least for a time, but it wasn't my business.
So are you going to talk to your brother?
Raph asked. I'll try, I promised.
Do you trust your family, Saxony?
Surprise at this question lifted my brows. Yes, of course I do.
Then maybe you should just tell them.
And there it was. It was the option that I was not willing to face. Was I ready to freak my parents out beyond measure? Was I ready to put my family in danger? Though I couldn't put voice to how, I instinctively felt that if they knew what I was, it could expose them somehow. The things Dante had done to convince me to work for him had been terrifying. Telling my family would change everything, and they'd be charged with keeping my secret too. I don't think I should, I said. My armpits felt damp as the imagined shock of my parents' faces filled my mind's eye. In Nicodemo's videos, he stressed secrecy. Most of the world doesn't know we exist. It might put them in danger if they knew.
Or keep them out of it, Raph said. It's your call, but I would tell them if it were me. Let me know if you change your mind and want to talk it through, okay? I know I'm far away, but I care.
Thanks, Raph. We said goodbye. I didn't get up off my bed for a long time after that. I sat there imagining the possible outcomes and reactions if I told my family what I was. All of them were terrifying. Chapter 6. The next day, I woke up in a quiet house for the first time since I'd arrived home. My parents were at work, RJ was sleeping off his celebrations in the basement, and Jack was out with friends. Immediately, my mind jumped to the black business card with the red foil. I made myself breakfast, including a double espresso for courage. I cleaned the kitchen, something that calmed me, and then went upstairs to my bedroom. I stood in front of my bulletin board, phone in hand, heart pounding. Holding the black card between my fingertips, I rubbed the red foil fireball with the pad of my thumb. The mark of a magus. My mark. Finally, I got sick of hesitating, hit the call button, and waited while the phone did its thing. "Yes?" answered a nasal female voice. A one-word answer to my call was not what I had been expecting, but I didn't know what I had been expecting, so... "I'm looking for Basil Chaplin, please." "He's rather busy at the moment. May I take a number and ring you back?" Upper-class British accent. "Sure, tell him Saxony Cagney called from Canada, a fire magus who was given his business card by Enzo Barberini." I rattled off my phone number, which she took in silence. She then hung up without saying anything else. I made a face. All that build-up for nothing. I switched apps to check my emails, and a few moments later, my phone rang. The number had the English country code, but it was different from the one I had dialed. "Hello?"
"Mrs. Cagney?"
British, male, resonant, and serious. I laughed. "Mrs. Cagney is my mother. Call me Saxony. Is this Basil?"
"Mr. Chaplin. Yes."
"Uptight much?" I cleared my throat. "Sorry, Mr. Chaplin."
"I feel I must inform you that we can track a cell phone call all the way across the world, and we don't take kindly to prank calls."
My head snapped up and I blinked. "Why would I prank call you? Do you not know Enzo Barberini?"
"We've spoken briefly over the phone when he was looking to hire..."
He cleared his throat.
"You say you are a fire mage?"
"Fire mage? We're not called magi? Magus for singular?" He laughed, sounding a touch more relaxed.
"They are one and the same. Magus is the Italian word for mage."
"Oh, of course," I said, feeling dumb. I could have figured that out. "Enzo recommended that I come and see you for..." I paused. "Training?"
"How old are you, Saxony?"
"I'll be 17 in a month." Basil sighed audibly. The random image of Sherlock Holmes pinching the bridge of his nose in annoyance came to my mind.
"I see. Would you mind if I called you back?"
"No, I guess not. Are you going to call Enzo and verify that I am what I say I am?"
"Precisely."
We said goodbye and hung up.
I sat down in the wooden chair I used to do my homework in when I was younger. It seemed to have shrunk. My knees bounced while I waited. My phone rang less than 5 minutes later. I snapped it up. Yes?
Saxony?
Totally different voice. Not Basil. Yes?
It's Gage.
I blanked out.
From the soccer game?
Oh, hey. I kicked myself for answering. The guy was cute, but I didn't want Basil's call to go to voicemail.
About that coffee.
Listen, would you mind if I called you back? I'm just expecting a call right now and don't want to tie up my line.
That sounds like a brush-off,
he said, his voice casual. It's not. What about this afternoon? At Flags? Do you know it?
Yeah, Flags is great. That would be nice.
Gage sounded genuinely pleased. 3:30?
I'll be there.
I could hear the smile in his voice. My phone buzzed and the screen reported another call coming in. +44. I gotta go, sorry.
No worries. See you this afternoon.
See you. I switched lines, hanging up on Gage and picking up the other call. Hello?
Miss Cagney?
It was Basil's voice again, but he sounded different than before, almost excited.
Enzo has informed me that you are indeed a fire mage, and not only that, but that you have endured a forceful burning. Is this true?
It's true, I said, my voice sounding extra rough. I cleared my throat.
This is highly unusual. Highly. Quite unprecedented. Do you have any idea how lucky you are to have survived? Well, never mind that right now. We would be very interested in working with you, but we don't deal with minors who haven't been previously vetted.
What does that mean?
Simply, it means we know their families. It also means they have received the fire genetically. Enzo has informed me that you were given the fire. This is not something we see often.
He finally took a breath.
Do your parents know what you are?
My pulse ratcheted a notch at the thought. No, I rasped.
Do you trust your family?
I blinked at the question I'd heard only yesterday from Raph. Of course.
Then you'd better tell them,
he said with finality. That won't put them in some sort of danger?
Miss Cagney, they would be in much greater danger if they didn't know.
I stood up from the rickety chair and began to pace. What do you mean? It was silent on the other end of the phone for too long. My heart rate increased. Are you still there?
I don't mean to frighten you, but there are organizations whose sole purpose is to find supernaturals.
He paused, and I knew he was trying to find a suitable word for a teenager's ears.
And apprehend them.
This wasn't news to me. It was exactly what Dante had done. What do they have to do with my family?
Some of these organizations use less than ethical methods to enlist their supernaturals. If your family isn't aware, then they aren't forewarned. Should one of these organizations find you and determine you are a good recruit, and mark my words, they would, because a mage who has lived through a burning is rare and extremely valuable, then they may have no qualms about using your family to get to you.
The blood drained from my face and my vision fuzzed out at the edges. My mouth opened, but I didn't know what to say. I closed my eyes. This was my worst fear.
Now I have frightened you, which is exactly what I had wanted not to do. Try to relax, he said. Of all the supernaturals out there, you are most likely not on their radar at the moment, considering where you live and how new you are. My recommendation at this time is to tell your family. Give them a small demonstration of your power. Tell them that Arcturus exists to help, that you aren't alone. We can help prepare you for life as a supernatural. We have been doing so for others like you since before you were born.
Arcturus?
It's the name of our organization. Don't look it up, you won't find anything. My next recommendation is to keep a low profile. In all likelihood, there won't be eyes on you right now, but the more active you are with your fire, the easier you make it for them to find you. When you turn 18, you can make a decision about coming to join us here for a time.
My heart sank. 18. More than a year away.
We have much we can teach you. At least I think we do. We don't work with many like you. We would be happy to have you as a guest before you turn 18, but you would need to be accompanied by a parent. And I presume that you are still in school.
My mind was whirling. I am. A rush of possibilities ran through my head. I had to get my parents from complete ignorance to accompanying me on a flash trip to England. Curiosity about Arcturus was overwhelming. and I was beyond curious about Basil. You sound so reasonable.
I assure you, many of my students think I'm not, he said brusquely. But as I said, you are a minor. Why don't you have a discussion with your family? Take as much time as you need. And then call me back when you're ready.
Okay. Any recommendations on how to break the news to them?
Gently,
he said. My lips twisted. How helpful. Where are you? I asked. London?
I am at present, for business. We have an office here. But Arcturus is actually headquartered in another location. One I'll share with you when we make arrangements for you to come visit for the first time.
Is it far from London, then? I pried.
Later, Miss Cagney. In time, he said, not unkindly.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. The most important thing for you right now is to know that you're not alone. You can live a good life with the fire.
My heart warmed at his words. That's good to know. I'll call you back soon, I promised.
I'll be here. Goodbye, Miss Cagney.
I hadn't yet parked my bike in the rack just down the street from Flag's Cafe when my phone buzzed. I jammed the front tire between the metal bars and took out my phone. Gage.
I'm here. What can I get you?
Me. Peach iced tea, thanks. I'm less than a block away. Air conditioning cooled the sweat at my brow as I entered the old cafe. Flag's was a favorite hangout for me and my friends. It almost seemed weird to be here without them. A hand flashed at me from the cluster of old couches at the back. I smiled at Gage and went to join him. Thanks, I said, plopping down across from him. So thirsty.
You're welcome,
Gage smiled. I took the iced tea and took a big slurp from the straw, the cold liquid soothing my throat. We smiled at each other awkwardly for a second. So, I'll start then, I said. You a born and raised Saltfordite like me? Gage laughed and shook his head.
Nope. I was born in Britain, but raised in Saltford.
He opened his mouth to say more when a buzzing sound came from his hip. Your pants are vibrating, I said, biting my straw and taking another sip.
Sorry.
Gage pulled out his phone and looked down at the screen. A deep line appeared between his brows. Everything okay? He sighed.
Sort of not, actually.
He caught my eye.
You've been watching the news?
I catch it here and there. These fires are pretty weird.
He frowned. They're more than weird.
He lowered his voice.
That yacht she lit up in the harbor 2 nights ago? That was my family's boat.
I jerked upright in shock. Whoa, back up. She? You know who it is? He cocked his head from side to side.
I'm pretty sure.
Have you gone to the police? He shook his head and raked a hand through his hair, mussing it.
No. My brother asked me to stay out of it.
Your brother? I'm confused. He scanned the cafe again.
This stays between us, right?
Of course. I was about to ask him why he was going to trust me because we'd only just met. But then he spoke again.
She's my brother's ex. He broke it off with her about 2 weeks ago.
He tilted his chin down and gave me a look filled with meaning.
She's not taking it very well.
Why is he trying to protect her then?
He's not. That's what I'm worried about.
Okay. That didn't really clear things up for me. Gage took a deep breath.
Callista, my brother's ex. She's not right. I suspected something was off about her when they first started dating. Short fuse, these weird, crazy eyes.
He gave me a wide-eyed look to show what he meant.
My brother said they just had a lot of passion, you know?
My cheeks colored, my red-headed genes betraying my discomfort. Sure, I murmured, as though I knew what he was talking about. Passion, right.
But when you've got crazy passion like that, you get the other side of it too. And after he broke up with her, that's what he got.
He raised his brows.
Her other side.
But fires? I whispered. She could hurt somebody. Don't you have an obligation to go to the police?
That's what I told him, but my brother...
Gage spread his palms against one another, long fingers splaying outward.
He's got his own ideas about how to stop her.
I'm not gonna lie, this is sounding worse and worse the more you say.
He eyed me. Haven't you ever been asked a favor from one of your brothers or one of your friends? A favor you thought was a bad idea, but you did it anyway because you love them?
Sure, but I don't think covering for my brother so he can run out and buy ice cream from the street truck and eat it before dinner falls into the same category. Gage snorted. No, he agreed. He raked a hand through his hair again. What should I do? I put down my iced tea. Let me ask you this. How would you feel if the next time she lights a fire, if it is her, he interjected, someone dies? He paled. I'd never forgive myself. I think you've answered your own question, I said. Gage's phone buzzed again and he looked down at it. He cursed under his breath and looked up at me. I'm so sorry, Saxony. I have to go. It's my brother. Seems like the gods are against us hanging out or something. He got to his feet. I hope not, I said, looking up at him. Go, don't worry. Sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Yeah. He tucked his phone away. Can I call you later? You'd better, I said, even if it's only to fill me in on how things turn out. He gave a grim nod. I will. Sorry again. Bye, Saxony. I watched him rush from the cafe, his back tense. I pulled out my own phone while I sipped the rest of my iced tea. I tapped out a text to Targa. Me. Did the Blue Jackets get called to the harbor for that burnt yacht? I finished my tea while I waited for her response. It wasn't until I was about to mount my bike and go back home when my phone chirped with a reply. Targa. What burnt yacht? Me. Don't you watch the news? Targa. Not since I got home. I've been busy. Me. Someone's been lighting fires in Saltford. I thought maybe your mom might know something about it. Targa. Did the yacht sink somewhere off the coast? Me. No, it was in the harbor. Police must have pulled it up onto the beach. That's where it was when I saw it on the news. Targa. The Blue Jackets would only get called if there was an underwater wreck. Me. Right. Just thought I'd ask. What's been keeping you so busy? Targa. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. I smiled grimly. She wouldn't believe me if I'd told her what was going on in my life either. Me. Try me. Targa. How about I save it till the sleepover? I'd rather tell the story once. It's involved. Me. Such a tease. Targa. Smile. I threw my leg over my bike, tucked my phone into my purse, and pedaled for home. As the trees and homes drifted past, my mind went back to my conversation with Basil. Around and around in my mind, our conversation went, and his directive to tell my family about what I was. No matter which way I looked at it, a gentle way of breaking it to them wasn't coming to mind. Chapter 7. That evening, my family had finished dinner before I had screwed up enough courage to say anything. I hadn't eaten much, and my napkin sat in shreds on my lap. Mom had just put a steaming casserole dish of strawberry rhubarb crumble on the table when Dad said, "You're awful quiet this evening, Saxony. Everything okay?" "You've also barely eaten anything," Mom said. "Honestly, Saxony, I'm concerned. Dr. Jacques says there's no cause for worry, but for the first time I'm wondering if we need a second opinion." She sat and began to dish out the dessert. "Fellow might be losing his touch," she added. Jack's hostile eyes flashed to my face and back down to his plate. "I feel fine. For the millionth time, I promise. But there is something that I have to tell you all," I said, clearing my throat. My stomach was nothing but a bundle of snapping nerves. Jack's eyes darted back up to my face, brows raised expectantly. I took a deep breath. Something did happen to me in Venice. "Oh, no." Mom put her spoon down and immediately her brow furrowed. "I'm all right, Mom. Just let me talk through this without interrupting me. When I'm finished, you can ask me all the questions you want, okay?" Her mouth went into a flat line and she looked at my dad, who shared her apprehension. The two of them grasped hands. I laughed. I'm not pregnant, and I haven't developed any addictions. Jack sat back and crossed his arms. "Both of those might actually be better than what is going on, though." My parents' eyes flashed to Jack and then back to me. "You know?" "He knows?" Mom said. "Why would you have told Jack and not us?" RJ, who had said nothing so far, finally said, "The suspense is killing me here. Can we please let the woman talk?" "Thank you, RJ. And no," I shot Jack a glare. "Jack doesn't know. He's been misjudging me since I got home." Jack snorted. "Here we go. And I thought we were going to get the truth." "You are," I said, my face flushing with anger. "Oh, really?" Jack shot back, his voice rising. "What is going on here?" Mom said.
Saxony is the arsonist, Jack blurted, his hostile gaze not leaving mine.
I closed my eyes and slumped in my seat. So much for avoiding drama.
What?
Dad yelled, his horrified expression turning on me.
No, I'm not, I said slowly and deliberately. I would never do that.
Saxony, Mom whispered, eyes wide and frightened. RJ leaned his elbows on the table and put his chin in his hands. His gaze moved around the table from face to face.
Would you all just listen to me for a minute? To whatever lies you're about to tell? Jack got up from the table. I don't want dessert. Sorry, Mom.
Frustration finally boiled over. I stood up, thrust my hand out, palm up. A red flame flared up from my hand, illuminating everyone's faces.
Sit down, Jack, I said, biting off the words.
Mom gasped and leaned back away from the fire, eyes wide, face white. Dad let out a few choice curse words, which I'd never before in my life heard him utter. RJ stared at the fire, body frozen. Jack stepped back, knocking over his chair. It was the fear in my family's faces that put the flame out, not my choice.
I'm sorry, I said, immediately regretful. I'm sorry. Please.
I put my hands out to Jack.
Please sit down. Let me explain everything. I am not the arsonist.
Each beloved face was staring and fearful. They were afraid. Of me.
Jack,
I whispered, my eyes pleading.
Please, sit down.
At first he didn't move, but slowly he picked up his chair and sat down.
I beg you to let me get through this. And I'm sorry that I've butchered the job so far.
I began, sitting down. I took a drink of water, hoping to snub the headache threatening in my temples.
It all began when I met Izia.
No one said a thing as I told the story. I didn't leave anything out, not even the forced burning or my debt to Enzo. I had to give away Elda's secret affair, but under the circumstances, I felt it had to be included or the whole story wouldn't make any sense. I concluded with my call to Basil Chaplin and his school for mages.
Mr. Chaplin said that I could live a good life with the fire, and that Arcturus was there to help.
I finished. My voice was even more hoarse than usual. I stopped talking for the first time in nearly an hour. The looks of shock, fear, concern, and incredulity on my family's faces had only grown. I cleared my throat and downed the rest of the water in my glass. My hands trembled, so I put the glass down.
Please say something,
I said, looking at my parents. My mom put her face in her hands, her elbows on the table. Dad put an arm around her. His face was completely white around his mouth. Mom gave a sob, and her shoulders heaved.
Mom?
I put a hand on her shoulder, my own eyes filled with tears. I hated to see my mother cry. She sat up, face anguished. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders and pulled me into her, kissing my hair.
My poor baby, she said. We could have lost you.
Dad wrapped his arms around my mother and me. I inhaled her lilac scent, tears rolling down my own cheeks, but now with relief. They believed me. My story was unbelievable, really. But when someone produces a flame from their hand in front of your face, what choice do you have but to believe what they say? The sound of chair legs scraping against the floor made me open my eyes, and I caught RJ getting up from the table and coming around to join the huddle. He wrapped his arms around my dad, and his big, warm hand fell on my arm and squeezed it. I peeked out to find Jack, but I couldn't see him through the tangle of arms around me. The tears flowed freely then, but from pure gratitude for my amazing, loving family. We stayed huddled like that until the only sounds were hiccups and sniffs. Then everyone broke and found their seats again. That was when I realized Jack was gone. I frowned at his empty seat, heart pounding. What had he thought? Why had he just gotten up and left without saying anything? Mom grabbed a tissue box from the counter and put it on the table. She blew her nose and wiped her face.
That certainly explains your fever,
she said through the tissue.
And her voice,
said Dad.
I wouldn't have believed it if you hadn't already shown us,
said RJ, shaking his head.
I mean, who knew? Fire magi?
Where did Jack go? I asked. Surely he didn't think I was the arsonist.
He's just in shock, said Dad. Give him time.
Aren't we all? Added Mom. Why didn't you tell us about this when it happened, Saxony?
She turned hurt eyes on me, and they raked my heart.
I didn't know how to, I explained. And I knew you'd make me come home right away, and I didn't want to. Of course we would have, she cried. I can't believe you weren't honest with us. I was trying to protect you, I said.
It's our job to protect you,
said Dad, his face hard. The color had returned to his cheeks, but there was an angry slash between his brows that hadn't been there before.
We need to talk with Elda about this.
Why? It wasn't her fault. It's not even Izia's fault. He's just a little kid. After a long pause, where nobody else spoke, I whispered, I think I was supposed to get the fire. My parents stopped talking and both stared at me. The reality of what I had just admitted sank in, and I grew still inside. It's my destiny, I said. Fresh tears trickled down Mum's face, and she brushed them away. Your destiny? Saxony, you were sabotaged. A normal life was stolen from you.
Aren't you overreacting a bit? RJ said. I mean, she's a miracle. She can make fire. She's like a superhero or something.
Actually, I think I'm more like an elemental, I said.
Right,
he said, and his eyebrows shot up. He nodded and gave me a fist bump.
That makes way more sense, actually.
Mum skewered my brother with a look. RJ, could you leave us alone to talk with your sister? RJ shrugged his heavy shoulders and got up.
It's rad you didn't die, Sax.
I smiled at my goofy, kind brother. Thanks, RJ.
Talk later,
he said as he left the kitchen.
So this Mr. Chaplin,
Dad began.
Yeah.
I turned back to my parents. This was the point of the conversation and the whole reason I had chosen to tell them. The goal was to get to Arcturus as soon as possible.
What is it he's going to teach you?
Don't be ridiculous, James, my mother interrupted. We're not going to send our daughter to England to go to fire school. We're going to consult a specialist and find a way to cure her of this. What? I cried. You have to let me go to England. There is no way to get rid of it. Trust me. I already looked into it. I'm not going to learn how to be a proper mage anywhere else. And besides...
I snapped my mouth shut. I hadn't yet told them everything Basil had said.
Besides? What?
Mum narrowed her eyes. I took a breath. No point in leaving anything out now.
He said that there are organizations who look to recruit people like me. Supernaturals. The way Dante did.
Her eyes went so wide I could see the whites of them.
Recruit them to do what?
She grabbed Dad's hand and they both squeezed so hard their knuckles turned white.
I don't know. Jobs that only someone with fire can do, I guess. Same reason Enzo had hired Nicodemo.
My voice trailed off.
You want a job as a fire thug for a corporation?
Mum looked horrified.
No, of course not. I didn't say that.
I twisted my hair nervously.
Mr. Chaplin said that sometimes these corporations are not the most ethical. They would blackmail you?
My mum's voice had gone up an octave and my dad was looking ill. This was a lot for a couple of Saltford parents. I spread my hands.
I don't know exactly, but maybe, yes. At Arcturus, I can learn how to protect myself from these corporations, stay off their radar.
My mum flashed terrified eyes at my dad.
How did this happen?
She ran both hands through the hair at her temples and pulled it back from her brow in frustration.
I feel like I've gone insane. James!
It's all right,
my dad said. His expression said it was anything but. One of the things that cut me deeply was his look of helplessness. My dad was always in control. Always. But right now that control had slipped, and he didn't know what this meant for his daughter, for his family.
We should never have let you go to Venice, Mum said.
She covered her face. Through her fingers, she said,
We're the worst parents in the world. No, Mom.
I let out a sound of frustration.
None of this had anything to do with you. I'm glad you let me go. Maybe I wasn't when I was burning up in that cell. Oh, God, she moaned.
She slid her chair back and put her head between her knees.
But I'm glad now, I added hastily. I feel more like me than I ever have.
Mum sat up, hair frazzled, face red. She put a hand out.
I need some time, she said. Saxony, would you mind giving your dad and me some privacy?
She held up a piece of shredded tissue to her nose, and a clump of it broke off and fell into her lap.
But...
It's a lot to take in, Saxony, Dad said softly. It's all right, we're not angry. Thank you for telling us. Your mom and I just need to talk, and I think we all need a good night's rest to gain some perspective. We'll discuss this again tomorrow."
I looked from one stressed-out, anxious expression to another and nodded. Okay, but please just consider the benefits that Arcturus could offer me. I need it. Mom put a hand on my arm. Tomorrow, Saxony. I can barely think. Her eyes misted up and she grabbed another tissue. I sighed, resigned. Tomorrow. I got up and was halfway through the kitchen when the sound of chair legs scraping against the floor made me turn around. My mom's arms swallowed me up in a bear hug, and she squeezed me so hard the breath wheezed right out of me. I love you, Saxony, she whispered. I love you too, Mom. I squeezed her back. Chapter 8. Dinner the next evening began as a tense, quiet affair. Jack's seat was noticeably empty. Where's Jack? I asked as I poured a round of waters for my parents, RJ and me. I haven't seen him all day. He hadn't answered any of my texts either, but I left that part out. Mom and Dad shared a look. He went to Zach's for the evening. I frowned. Does he still think I'm the arsonist? Even after I explained everything?
Give him time, said RJ before shoveling a forkful of mashed potato into his mouth. Dude's freaked out.
My mom looked pale and drawn, and it seemed as though the lines on the sides of my father's mouth were deeper. My heart ached for them, and a twang of guilt went through me. They sure hadn't asked for this, but neither had I. And it wasn't like I had contracted cancer or some other horrible disease. There were families dealing with much worse things than we were. As we were cleaning up our dessert dishes, Dad finally spoke.
RJ, would you let your mom and me have a bit of time with Saxony, please?
You got it, Pops,
said RJ, giving a nod and an enigmatic, close-mouthed smile. Take your plate, please, my mom added. RJ took his dish and even grabbed the leftover food from the table. Then he came back for the rest of the dishes. My mom mouthed, "Wow," at my dad. It was normally agony for either of my brothers to have to clean up after a meal, but here RJ was doing it without being asked. It was a testament that he realized how stressed my parents were and how serious the situation was. I smiled my appreciation at him. As RJ disappeared into the basement, my dad threaded his fingers and rubbed his palms together. This gesture was classic James Cagney preparing himself for a difficult conversation.
We were up all night, Saxony,
he began.
Your mother and I.
I'm sorry, I said.
It's all right. This isn't your fault, he replied. But we spent hours researching online and we couldn't find anything about your condition. Nothing that wasn't part of gaming or fantasy stories anyway.
His mouth turned down.
It seems that pyrokinesis has never been proven to be a real thing. But you,
he scratched his head absently,
can easily prove that it is. Unless that flame you made in your palm was some sleight of hand you perfected while you were away in order to play some kind of joke on us.
He looked at me hopefully.
We won't be angry if it was. Just be honest.
It's not a joke, I said. I wanted to explain that what I had wasn't as simple as pyrokinesis either. The fire inside me seemed at times to be its own entity. At least it had in Venice before I'd been trapped in a cell with no water. After that, it felt more like a part of me, and not a potential enemy. He nodded and cleared his throat.
No, I suspected not. We were just hoping. Anyway, your mom and I would like to arrange a conference call with this Basil fellow over in England. Seems he might be our only source of information.
My heart gave a thud of hope. This was heading in the right direction. Okay. I took out my phone. Want me to call him right now? It's 10:30 in the evening in England right now, sweetheart, Mom said.
Maybe it's best we get this over with,
Dad said at the same time. My parents looked at each other.
This is what he does,
Dad said to Mom softly. He looked at me.
It's worth a try. If he doesn't answer, we'll try again tomorrow.
I nodded and hit dial on my phone and put it to my ear. The long dash of an international call sounded once, and the phone clicked.
Miss Cagney?
It was Basil. That was quick. Did I wake you?
Not at all. I'm pleased that you called back so soon. Have you spoken with your family?
His voice was hopeful, expectant. I have, and actually I have both of my parents here with me. We're hoping you have time to speak with us. Is that possible? I smiled at my parents, hoping I looked reassuring. A lot was riding on this conversation.
Yes, yes. His voice perked up even more. I would welcome the opportunity.
Okay, I'm going to put you on speakerphone. I gave my parents a thumbs up. A complicated look flashed between my parents. Anxious, concerned, hopeful. I pressed the speakerphone button and said, "Okay, you are live, sir." I put the phone down in the middle of the table. No one said anything. After a prolonged pause, Basil's voice came from the phone.
Hello?
My dad cleared his throat.
Mr. Chaplin? It's James Cagney, Saxony's father. Yes, Basil Chaplin here. Pleased to meet you. Thanks. My wife Annette and I are both here, and
Dad took Mom's hand.
we're not doing very well with what we've learned about our daughter.
My heart sank.
Understandable,
said Basil.
Saxony has told us a little bit about what you do, but not very much. And I guess...
Dad paused.
You'd like to know more about how I can help your daughter,
offered Basil.
Yes, exactly. And you, Mrs. Cagney? How are you doing?
My parents shared a look of appreciative surprise that he'd asked after my mom specifically. It was like he'd been through this before or something. The butterflies in my stomach began to settle. Basil's voice emitted confidence and empathy. It felt like we were dealing with a professional. "To be honest, I'm upset and I'm frightened," came my mom's response. "And I'd like to know if there is a way to cure my daughter of whatever this is." She took a breath and she reached over and squeezed my shoulder. I kept my face carefully neutral. I had already explained that there was no cure, but if I didn't have enough credibility in her eyes, maybe Basil would.
Mr. and Mrs. Cagney, said Basil, not unkindly, I understand you're in shock, and you're upset. That is all perfectly understandable. I am here to help, and I believe the best way I can do that is by not mincing words. As far as we are aware, there are only 2 ways for the fire inside your daughter to go out.
I could almost picture him holding up a finger as he spoke.
When she dies.
I pictured a second finger joining the first, and I knew exactly what words would accompany it.
Or it can be passed on to another individual if she is dying. That's it. Other than those 2 events, neither of which are desirable, there is no cure.
After several long seconds, my father answered.
That's what our daughter told us. She's correct.
So what's next, then? Asked Mom. Her voice was heavy, defeated. Her eyes had misted up and the corners of her mouth turned down. My heart gave a painful ache at the look on her face.
This is where I come in. Before I explain any more, though, I'd like to see Saxony light a small flame. It's the final step before I'll talk about Arcturus any further.
My parents both looked at me. I picked up the phone and switched on the video. A clean-shaven face and black spectacles appeared. Basil was an attractive older gentleman with a wide mouth bracketed by deep smile lines. "Hello, Mr. Chaplin." I smiled into the camera. Basil nodded and smiled back.
"Hello, Saxony."
He gave a nod, and his wave of brown hair flopped elegantly onto his forehead.
"Go ahead, please."
I lifted my hand in front of the camera so my fingers were visible and pushed a small flame out the tip of my finger.
"Thank you," said Basil. "Good enough. You can turn off the video if you like."
"No, please." Mom got up and grabbed a mug from the cupboard. "Leave it on. I'd rather see your face."
"If you prefer."
Basil smiled. I felt that same feeling of a bond forming as I looked at his face. I had felt it when I'd first seen his name printed in foil on the business card, again when I had spoken to him for the first time, and I felt it growing now just talking with him. I propped the phone against the mug and set it in front of my parents. Mom and Dad slid their chairs closer together, and I pulled mine next to Mom's. The 3 of us huddled our faces close so that Basil could see all of us.
"Oh, that's lovely," said Basil. "It's nice to see all of you."
He took off his glasses and they disappeared from the screen while he cleaned them.
"I founded Arcturus in 1991. I had the means and the property to fortify a kind of private school, a safe place."
He put his glasses back on and pushed them up the bridge of his nose.
"The objective of the school has always been to train mages for the kind of life a supernatural can face."
"Do you have the fire?"
Mom asked. Basil nodded. "I do. I was born with it." What kind of life does a supernatural face? Asked Dad. That's up to the individual, but what's important is that they are aware of their options and can make an educated decision. They need coping strategies and camouflaging techniques to protect their identities. I know you have a lot of questions, said Basil. My suggestion and preference is that you visit me here at your earliest convenience. You could see the kind of environment I've set up here for young people like Saxony. We can discuss Saxony's future at length, and I would better be able to assess your daughter.
My parents shared a look. My heart began to pound in earnest, and I shot Basil a grateful smile. He couldn't have said things any more perfectly to put my parents at ease. The more he talked, the more I wanted this. I folded my hands in my lap and deliberately tried to keep my body and face calm, but inside I was thrumming with excitement.
Consider yourself formally invited, added Basil.
I have another 2 weeks until school starts, I said to my parents. Every cell in my body was now vibrating with hope. My mother shushed me and put an arm around my shoulders. This is all very sudden, Mr. Chaplin, she said to Basil. We'll take the school year to think things through. When Saxony graduates, maybe— The school year? My heart dropped like a stone, and I stared at my mom in horror.
Annette,
my dad said gently. I gave my dad the most pleading look I had ever given him in my life. My father turned to the phone.
We'll discuss things and call you back, if that's all right.
Of course, said Basil. Any time, day or night. People like Saxony are why I exist. I'm here for her, and for you.
Thank you for everything,
said my dad.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chaplin, I added.
You're welcome.
I pressed the button to end the call and closed my eyes so my mom wouldn't receive the glare I wanted to shoot at her. I knew her. We'd had enough clashes where I had let my temper fly at her. It had never turned out in my favor. Mom, I began, my voice trembling with emotion. Please don't make me wait a whole year. I opened my eyes and looked at her. I need to go. I have never wanted anything more than I have wanted this. Do you remember how much I wanted to go to Italy? My mom took my hand, her lips parted. Italy was nothing compared to this. Mr. Chaplin is the only person in the world who can help me. Can't you see that? My dad spoke up.
I have vacation days I haven't used up. I could take her tomorrow and be back by—
He paused to think. I perked up with excitement. This would be perfect. Mom, I said, putting a hand on her shoulder, if you want to keep me safe, send me to Arcturus. Otherwise, I have no idea what I'm up against.
Or what we're dealing with as a family,
added my father, putting a hand on her other shoulder. Mom's mouth was a flat line. She looked at my father. You'd better get on the flights. They'll be very expensive at the last minute. I wanted to leap up from the table and dance around the kitchen. My dad and I shared a look of relief. My heart pounded with excitement and my tummy was full of tremors. I'll call Basil and let him know, I said. How many days?
I'd better take no more than 2,
said my dad. He got up and grabbed his laptop case from where it was propped against the island. I grabbed my phone and I got up from the table as my dad sat down and booted up his laptop. I redialed Basil's number with trembling fingers and waited.
That was quick, answered Basil.
We're coming. My dad and I. I couldn't have wiped the grin off my face if someone had paid me.
Excellent.
He sounded almost as enthusiastic as I felt. 2 days is okay? I asked.
Plenty. Book your tickets for Gatwick. I'll have a car pick you up. My valet's name is Pete.
Okay. I turned and made a wow face at my parents, who were both watching me. I'll text you our landing time then?
Perfect. I'll wait on you.
Thanks, Mr. Chaplin.
Not at all.
I hung up the phone. He'll have a car pick us up. My whole body felt wired with energy. Sleep would be impossible tonight. Just have to tell him when we land. My parents glanced at each other.
That's awfully nice of him,
said my father. He turned to his laptop and pulled his glasses out of his pocket. He tilted his head back and peered at the screen through his lenses.
Looks like there's a flight tomorrow night,
he added, scrolling with his ergonomic mouse. I couldn't help the sound of joy that squeaked out of me as I bounced in place. Mom skewered me with a stern look. Don't get too excited, Saxony. This is just a fact-finding mission. We're not leaving you there. I know, I said. Then you'd better go pack. Yes, ma'am. I bolted from the kitchen and took the stairs 2 at a time up to my room to do just that.
Chapter 9. Dad and I had barely rolled our carry-on luggage out through the one-way sliding doors at Gatwick and out into arrivals when I spotted a portly man in a black suit holding up an iPad with Cagney family on the screen. "You must be Pete," I said with a grin as we rolled up to him. "Yes, miss," he said, smiling. His face was soft and jowly, and he reminded me of a St. Bernard dog. "How was your flight?" "I slept the whole way because I didn't sleep a wink the night before we left," I said, shaking his hand. "This is my dad, James Cagney." I stepped aside and Pete shook hands with him. "Pleased to meet you," Pete said. His accent was thicker than Basil's. "Have other luggage, do you?" "Nope, this is it," said Dad. "We packed light." "Excellent, excellent. I'll take this, miss," Pete said as he reached for my carry-on. "Anyone need anything before we take off? Toilets that way, coffee, water and nibbles that other way." He pointed in the two directions. "What's your pleasure?" We said we were ready to go. "Very well," he said. "This way to the car, then." The humidity in the air reminded me of Italy, but the temperature was cooler. I pulled my cardigan close around me and closed the tie at the waist, more for looks than any feeling of being cold. "I didn't think I'd be back in Europe so soon," I said to my father. He gave me a tense nod. "Or for such a strange reason." "Yeah." I gave him my most reassuring smile. "Thank you, Dad." He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and kissed my temple as we walked through the parking lot. The car Pete led us to was a larger version of a black London cab, longer and more luxurious, but with the same curves and glossy black paint. Pete chattered away as he loaded our luggage into the boot and held the back door open. Dad and I piled into the roomy back seat. There was enough legroom for a Great Dane to lie down in front of our feet and still not rub up against the back seat. The seats were cushy black leather, and there was a tinted window between the front seat and the back. Pete got into the driver's side. The car shook and growled like a diesel as he turned the engine over. The glass between the back seat and the front slid back. Pete said, "We're little more than an hour to the manor. Just knock on the glass if you need anything. Remember that we drive on the other side of the road here in jolly old England, so don't be alarmed. I've been driving nigh on 40 years, so you're in good hands." "Thank you, Pete," I said, fiddling with the seatbelt. "Not at all." The glass slid closed. The car made its way out of Gatwick Airport parking, and we soon found ourselves on a narrow freeway and in the middle of fast-moving traffic. As Pete drove us through various roundabouts and turns, I began to notice a consistent destination listed on the signage. "I think we might be headed to Dover," I said. "It's been on all the signs every time we've taken a turn." My dad peered out the window. "As in the White Cliffs of? Always wanted to see those." Soon the road became less busy and the scenery much prettier. Everything was green and lush, but the sky was overcast with thick gray clouds. For the first time, we passed an exit pointing to Dover without taking it, and the road became a single-lane road. Trees arched over from one side and a stone fence lined the other. I could see the ocean in the distance. We took another turn toward the water and trees closed in and we began to descend. Pete downshifted and the car slowed as the downhill became steep, and forested land closed in on both sides. The road began to traverse along the hillside, and Pete guided the car around the steep switchback and headed back the other way. We passed 3 more switchbacks before the ground leveled off. Around the last bend, we pulled up in front of a gate which was already sliding open. There were no identifying signs to tell us where we were. "Saxony. Look," said Dad. "I am," I said, in a voice just as awed as his. The whole property was closed in by a tall stone wall laced with ivy. The driveway was a large circle, the center of which was bursting with rose bushes. A tiered water feature in the center towered high above the blossoms, and water cascaded into a pond where the lazy shadows of koi were drifting. The car pulled up in front of an old stone manor. This time I did spot a plaque to the right of the door reading, "Chaplin Manor, established 1814. The place even shared Basil's last name. The car came to a halt in front of the wide double doors, and we spilled out into the humid sea air. I could hear seagulls screaming in the distance, and waves crashing onto shore. "Welcome to Chaplin Manor," said Pete as he got out and opened the boot. The car was still running as he took out our baggage.
Our eyes roamed the steep roof, stained glass windows, and castle-like turrets. The front door opened, and Basil stepped out into the overcast light. He was finely dressed in a suit jacket and bow tie. He had a cane in one hand, but I was pretty sure he didn't need it. He stood straight, wide shoulders back and spine erect. His brown hair was perfectly coiffed and sprinkled with gray above the ears. I thought he was quite handsome for an older gentleman.
"You must be Mr. Chaplin," Dad said, holding out his hand. "Thank you for having us on such short notice."
Basil gave a nod as they shook hands.
"My pleasure, Mr. Cagney."
Our host turned to me. The moment our eyes met, I had a strange feeling rock through me. It was as though we were already connected by some invisible tether. It was difficult to describe. I had bonds with my parents, of course. No one could replace them in my heart. But Basil was different. This man was a mage, just like me, and that made us family. I could feel it.
"Saxony,"
he said, looking down into my face, searching my eyes. He held out his hand, and I took it. As if the link I had felt only moments ago wasn't enough, the heat that shot up my arm from his hand gripping mine was startling. It zinged like a live wire straight into my heart. It felt like our hands had become molten metal and were now welded together. My brows shot up with surprise at the unexpected sensation.
"It's a mage bond," he murmured. "Try not to be alarmed by it."
I opened my mouth, but no words came out. As he released my hand, my arm continued to throb. It wasn't unpleasant, just unexpected and distinct. I looked down at my palm, but it appeared normal.
"Saxony?"
I looked up at my father's voice. He and Basil were already on the doorstep, ready to head inside. Dad raised his eyebrows.
"Are you coming?"
I grabbed my carry-on and took it up the steps. "Sorry, yep." We stepped into the house and Basil closed the door behind us. The foyer was large and carpeted, with multiple arched doorways leading off in different directions. A huge empty fireplace with soot darkening the chimney stood off to the right. The ceiling went up and up, showing another 3 floors of balconied halls above us.
"It's eerily quiet these days," said Basil. "I'm sorry about that. My students are on summer break. It's a good time for you to visit, though."
Dad and I gaped in wonderment.
"So,"
Basil continued. He stepped back from us and spread his hands, his cane dangling from his right fingers.
"Welcome to Arcturus."
Chapter 10. Basil showed us the main floor, which included 3 large sitting rooms full of comfy furniture and decorated with very English-looking wallpaper and paintings. He said they were common rooms and could be used any time by anyone. 2 of the rooms had sprawling windows facing out into a large backyard, and the ocean was visible just beyond the green space. He showed us the kitchens and dining room, a library that smelled musty, and pointed out the direction of his office. He led us out into a courtyard. Across the flagstones stood another building, which looked much newer than the rest of the manor.
"This building is fireproof," said Basil, "for obvious reasons."
He unlocked the big metal door with a key he took from inside his coat.
"This is where we do our practical classes and coaching."
We stepped into one of the strangest spaces I had ever been in. The air was cool, the ceiling was high, and there were a lot of metallic surfaces, strange-looking instruments, and a couple of closed-off rooms with black-tinted glass windows.
"Everything done in here has to do directly with our firepower. Utilizing it, controlling it, perfecting and honing skills," explained Basil. "Not all students are interested in learning these things." "Why is that?"
My dad's eyes jumped from oddity to oddity. The metal beams, the glittering black floor, the contraptions with digital screens and panels.
"Being a fire mage hurts, as Saxony will know."
Basil nodded at me. "Yes, I told them," I said. "But I don't have any pain anymore."
"I imagine it ceased not long after your burning?" Basil asked.
I nodded. Basil faced my father.
"As a supernatural, your daughter would have been unusual had she not passed through a burning. But now that she has, well..."
A look passed over his face that I couldn't define.
"She is exceedingly rare." "Have any of your other students done it?"
my father asked, putting his hands in his pockets like he was tempted to touch things.
"Heavens, no," cried Basil. "We actively discourage it. It's far too dangerous. It is better to learn to manage the pain than to risk a burning."
He turned away and walked through the space. We followed him.
"As I was saying, once my students pass the first level exam, many of them quit the practical training. They don't have any interest in utilizing the fire, only in being able to live with it."
Looking around at the training space, I could admit it freely to myself. I was fascinated. What could I learn to do with the fire? Basil had said I was extremely rare, so wouldn't I be doing myself a disservice if I didn't at least try and see what I was capable of? The idea of training with Basil made my heart speed up. "What kinds of things do you teach in the first level?"
"I'm glad you asked,"
Basil answered, stopping beside what looked like a big, square, flat panel covered in vinyl. There was a strange, digital meter attached to it.
"With your father's permission, I would like to put you through a few basic tests. It would help us have a clearer picture of where you're at."
He looked from me to my dad.
"Knowing this would help me make a recommendation for Saxony, how long she might expect to be here and such."
Dad said,
"Makes sense. It's okay by me."
Basil reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a folded sheet of paper.
"I'll need you to sign this form, and then I'll have to ask you to watch from there."
He pointed up to a metal room that looked like it had been bolted to the ceiling. It was completely encased in glass and could only be reached by a long metal staircase along the wall.
"It's just a precaution," Basil added. "We are overzealous with safety here." "That's appreciated,"
Dad said, taking the paper from Basil and opening it. He skimmed it, took the pen Basil offered, and bent to sign it against the low metal railing.
"Thank you," said Basil, taking the page and tucking it inside his coat. "I'll file it when we're done here. If you wouldn't mind."
He nodded up at the high room. Dad climbed the stairs, his footsteps sending out a metallic echo. He entered the small glass room and closed the door. He appeared at the glass, watching. I turned to Basil. "Can he hear us?"
"Yes," he answered. "There's a speaker that picks up what's going on down on floor level."
He took off his jacket and tucked it into a metal drawer.
"Would you like a drink of water before we begin?"
"Please." My stomach unleashed a horde of dragonflies. This was it. I was going to be tested by someone who could actually tell me something about myself. Basil took a metal cup from a stack on a nearby shelf and poured me some water from a dispenser. I drank every last drop and handed it back to him. I took off my cardigan and he tucked it into the same drawer as his jacket. We faced each other and I was reminded once again of the bond between him and me. He was relaxed, so I relaxed.
"Do you mind if I ask you a few questions first?"
Basil leaned against the desk and worked on rolling up his shirt sleeves. "Ask away."
"During your burning, do you have any idea how many hours you went without water?"
I frowned, trying to remember. "I'm not sure. I was unconscious for some of it." My eyes flicked to the cage. Hearing the details might upset my dad.
"More than 8 hours?"
"I would think more than 12, I answered. Something crossed Basil's face. A shadow of emotion. Surprise? Horror? I wasn't sure.
"And what did you experience after you'd had water? I mean, within the next day or so? Emotionally speaking."
He finished with his shirt sleeves and crossed his arms. I hesitated as a realization struck. "You've been through this, haven't you?"
"I have," he said. "I had to. I wouldn't be able to run Arcturus if I hadn't."
I felt a dart of shock. Basil had endured a burning just so he could start this school? He must have been very driven to make it happen. "I felt harder," I said truthfully. "Stronger, I guess. Emotionally speaking." I thought about how I'd felt toward Federica and her betrayal. Not without forgiveness, but... I paused. Basil waited, not prompting me with suggestions. "I think my judgment got a bit harsher. But it's weird."
"Why weird?"
"Because my temper is actually easier to control now. I used to be more of a hothead."
Basil's eyebrows flicked at this. "Interesting. And your body? How did that change?"
"On the outside, only my mark changed," I answered. "On the inside, I couldn't tell you if I changed physically, but I definitely felt different. Almost like, Self-consciousness washed over me. It sounded so dumb.
"Go on."
His voice was gentle. Volcanic rock, I finished, feeling lame. He didn't seem surprised at that. If it doesn't make you uncomfortable, could I see your mark? Sure, I answered, toeing off my left shoe. I peeled off my sock and rolled my foot inward so the mark on the middle toe was visible. Basil knelt down. He took my toe in his fingers and turned it gently. The mark was buried in between my middle toe and fourth toe. It was shaped like a tiny fireball, no larger than a mole, and black as pitch. I couldn't see Basil's face as he inspected it. When he stood, he looked pale. Could I see yours? I asked, feeling a touch awkward. In answer, Basil pulled aside his collar. His mark was just under his collarbone. It looked almost identical to mine, so black that it looked like ink. I assume your mark changed color after your burning? Basil asked. He really did seem more affected by the look of my mark than anything else so far. Or maybe he'd just stood up too fast. Yes, it used to be brown, like a freckle. He nodded. His upper lip looked damp, and he ran a hand over his mouth. Do you mind if I take a photo of it? I guess not, I said. What for? I waited while he took out a cell phone and snapped a couple of close-up pictures of my toe. It will go into your student dossier, Basil said, while he captured my mark. Because you're so rare, you're of particular interest. Working with another mage like you will be a first for me. He stood up and shut off his phone. There is very little formal scientific study of our kind. What there is would be secret. I do my own, but I'm not a scientist. I do it for my own knowledge, and to have something valuable to pass on to the next generation. You would be of great help to me in that. Oh. I smiled, but I wasn't sure what to say. I had come here for Basil to help me. It hadn't occurred to me that I could be of some help to him, too. I liked the idea. Can you feel the fire right now? He asked. No. If I didn't already know I was a magus. Sorry, a mage. I wouldn't suspect anything. I feel normal. Can you light it for me? And look into my eyes as you do so. Don't try and affect how they look in any way. Okay. I lifted my gaze to his and he stepped closer. I called the fire to life in my belly and felt its heat lick up my insides at my request. Is it lit? Basil asked, brows up. Yes. Remarkable, he murmured. Can you illuminate your eyes for me, please? I drew the heat upward through my neck and pushed it through the thin stems of my eyes. They grew hard and hot. My vision sharpened. The stubble of Basil's shadow became more pronounced. Can you make them orange instead of red? Basil stared into my eyes, unblinking. He reminded me of my doctor, looking from pupil to pupil, probing at the secrets there. I pushed more heat upward and outward. Now yellow. I pushed further. The heat in my eyes increased, but there was no pain. I had never made them this bright on purpose before. My vision sharpened again, almost startling me with all the distinct edges and contrasts that I hadn't noticed until now. I had thought Basil's eyes were a brown, but now I could distinguish flecks of olive in them. I could make out paler threads of rust around his left pupil. His pupils took on a strange cast, like there was a glow of dark red far inside them. Are you able to make them blue? He asked. I cranked up the heat. A low-frequency vibration began in my core and radiated outward. The little muscles around my spine quivered, and my brain felt like it was pulsing softly. Then something very strange happened. Basil's face looked for a moment like it had become translucent. I thought I could detect the vertical shadows where the roots of his teeth were, the dark hollows of his orbital cavities. His skull seemed to waver in and out of detection, like a faulty X-ray. All right, he asked. If anything feels bad, you can stop at any time. I pressed my lips closed, and the shadows of Basil's skin faded to opacity, and his skull disappeared. I wasn't sure I had even seen it. Maybe I had imagined it? I'm fine, I said, and held the heat in my eyes steady. May I touch your hands? I held them out, and Basil took them and held my fingers gently. His eyes closed for a moment, as though he was thinking. The shadow of a line appeared between his brows. He was properly sweating now. A sheen of moisture beaded on his brow and upper lip. That's enough, he said softly, letting my hands go. Thank you. I loosened the heat from my skull, and it slipped quietly back down my spine and went to sleep. My insides cooled instantly, and I once again felt like a normal teenage girl and not a walking furnace. Basil studied my face. "How was that? Did you notice anything particular about your vision?" I hesitated. "Be honest, please. It's the only way I can do you any service, Saxony." "I thought for a second that I could see the bones in your face." Basil nodded like this was normal, but his shirt was growing dark at the armpits. "Anything else?" "Just that my vision got sharper the hotter my eyes got." He nodded again. "All right." He leaned back against the desk behind him and took a handkerchief out of his breast pocket. He wiped his brow with it and stuffed it back, making a crumpled lump in his shirt. He crossed his arms. "Have you ever felt the fire detonate in your joints before?" My mind flashed back to Dante beating me up in the backyard of his villa. I frowned. "Yes." "Do you remember if light came through your skin?" "I didn't let it." "You're talking about internalizing and externalizing." "You know about it?" He looked surprised. "How?" I nodded. Well, did Enzo tell you where I got my fire from?" "He mentioned that it was passed to you from a dying boy. Is that right?" "Yes, but that boy's father recorded some video clips before he died, and I got to see them. He talked about controlling the eye glow thing, and also how a magus can detonate the fire in their joints to make them stronger." "Have you experimented with that?" "Not really. I can internalize, I guess, but I've only been a mage for a little over a month." I laughed. "I'm still getting used to the idea." Basil smiled. "Are you willing to throw a few punches for me?" I shot him a side eye. "Did you just ask me to hit you? Like some frat boy at a house party?" He laughed. "Not me." He jerked his chin toward the contraption with the padded panel behind me. "The bag." "Oh." I turned to face the bag and laughed, relieved. "Sure." Basil bent down beside the machine and flicked a switch at the back. The digital panel beside the punching bag flashed with multiple glowing zeros. He came to stand in front of me. "Make a fist for me." I curled my right hand. "Put your thumb here," he said, moving my digit off my first knuckle, "and hit with your first two knuckles right here." He tapped a finger on my knuckles. "Keep your wrist straight and try not to send your fist into an arch. Come straight at the stuffing from the shoulder, okay? Keep the bones in your first two knuckles aligned with your forearm so you don't hurt yourself." "Okay," I nodded. "With the fire?" "Without for the first throw." He stepped back. "Whenever you're ready." I brought my fists up, went onto my toes and bounced for a second, then threw a punch with everything I had, but without using the fire. The digital screen flashed the number 45. "What does that mean? Is that good?" "It's expected for a girl of your age, weight, fitness level, and inexperience," Basil answered. "The number is in PSI, pounds per square inch. Your fist is roughly 4 inches square, so you've delivered a peak punching force of 180 pounds. It's average for a woman." He reset the digital screen. "This machine is accurate within half a pound, so it's not perfect. However, it's good enough for our purpose." He turned to face me. "I'd like you to try it with the fire, but I won't coach you. And then we'll try it a second time, and I'll give you some tips." "All right." The fire flared up inside me, ready to accommodate. Basil stepped back. "Give it your best shot." I bounced on the balls of my feet and then sent another shot at the bag. At the same time, the fire went off in my right shoulder, elbow, and wrist. The digital screen flashed again. The number read 382.5. "Whoa!" My hand flew to my mouth and I glanced at Basil in shock. "That's a crazy difference." Basil blew out a breath. It was the first time he'd given any kind of obvious emotional reaction. He ran a hand over his mouth and chin. "That was 1,530 pounds of punching force." He lowered his chin and looked over his glasses at me. "You just broke the world record by 110 pounds." My jaw dropped. I looked up at my dad. He looked dazed and somewhat amused. I let out a guffaw of surprise. "I'm a freaking Marine!" Basil gave a bemused, lopsided grin, but the sides of his mouth were tight. "I'm not sure a Marine would know what to do with you. Let's try it again, and this time I'll coach you." Basil explained how to place my feet and how to use my whole body to throw a punch. He explained how he wanted me to use the fire in almost every joint in my body. The explosions need to be microseconds apart, he explained as he was crouched down beside me. Do you understand? To follow the flow of energy. If you mix up the detonations and fire 1 moment sooner than you should, you'll dampen your efforts instead of optimizing them. He lowered his voice, and his forehead wrinkled with concern. You could even hurt yourself, and we don't want that. Do I need to worry about you externalizing accidentally? I shook my head. I internalize without even thinking about it now. I've just never tried to make so many detonations at once before. You don't have to do this. It's your choice. I want to. I narrowed my eyes at the soft surface of the bag, preparing. Basil stepped back. Any time, Saxony. I went through the motion in my mind first, and the fire flickered in response to my mental dress rehearsal. I felt heat flare up in my joints in reaction to my mind. When I threw the punch, it seemed time slowed down. I could feel the heat as it traveled through my body, hitting every joint involved and going off like successive bombs inside me. The square surface of the punching bag, which was more like a vertical platform with a metal arm bracing it, made a strange sound upon impact, almost like a drum. The digital meter beeped and the number appeared. Basil and I stared at the meter. That can't be right, I said, looking at him finally. Can that be right? Basil sort of drooped back against the desk. It's right, he said quietly. You just produced more than 4 tons of force. 8,900 pounds, give or take. I looked back at the reading. 2,243 psi. My whole body was tingling, but the fire had gone quiet. My punching hand throbbed a little and my heart was pounding, but otherwise I felt normal. Have you done this test? I asked. Basil's mouth quirked and a bit of color returned to his cheeks. Want to know if you can out-punch your superior? I grinned. Can I? He blinked and put a hand to his heart. A bloke has to have some secrets. I laughed. Fair enough. What else can we do? My blood was up and I liked this game. I looked around the room at the other contraptions and curiosities, wondering what they were all for. That's quite enough, said Basil, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. He looked up at my dad and gestured for him to come down. I'll show you to your rooms and give you some time to freshen up. We'll talk more over lunch. Chapter 11. Basil showed us up the grand staircase from the foyer to 2 rooms across the hall from each other. The rooms weren't unlike a hotel, each with an ensuite bathroom and a writing desk stocked with paper and pens. He told us he would have lunch ready at 1 and to take a rest and meet him in the dining room. Once he'd left us, my dad and I faced each other in the hallway. How did that feel? My dad asked. The tests? I opened the door to my room and rolled my carry-on inside and then came back to join my dad in the hall. It was good, actually. I mean, I laughed. A bit weird, I guess, to be tested on my power, or whatever you want to call it. But it was amazing to meet another person like me. I could learn so much from him. I looked up at my father. Can you understand why I need to come to this school? He nodded. What do you think of Basil? I like him, I said truthfully. My dad sighed. I do too. We made our way down for lunch together. A single table among many in the dining room had been dressed for a meal. Basil stood near one of the tall windows talking quietly with a woman in an apron. She had dark glossy hair swept up into a high bun on her head. She was petite but strong-looking, with square hands. Her skin was olive but lightly freckled. They looked up and smiled as we entered. I hope you're hungry, said Basil. He gestured to the lady beside him. This is Susan Palmer, our resident chef during the school year. She was kind enough to come take care of us on short notice. He turned to Susan. This is James Cagney and his daughter Saxony. Hands were shaken all around. Nice to meet you, said Susan. She grasped my hand firmly, and when we shook, she deliberately looked me in the eye. The subtlest telltale glow reflected in her pupils. My calves swept with goose flesh as heat shot up my arm. You're a mage too, Susan laughed. I am. But you're the cook here? My father sounded surprised.
Yes, food has always been my passion.
Susan teaches an elective here called Food and Fire, said Basil, rocking back on his heels. It was her idea, and a jolly good one at that. Susan smiled up at him. At the glance that passed between the two of them, I had immediate suspicions that Basil and Susan might be more to each other than just colleagues.
I hope you join us, Saxony, said Susan. Right now, enjoy the meal. I'll leave you to it.
With a nod, she left the room through a swinging door. We sat down, and Basil lifted the silver lids from the food. The sense of steamed trout, braised vegetables, and mushroom risotto made my mouth water. A thought occurred to me as we began to fill our plates. Did Susan use her fire to cook this food? Basil chuckled. She could have, but no. She doesn't do that anymore, except when she teaches. She's a second-degree mage. Is that a popular class? My dad asked, looking skeptical. Cooking? Basil shook his head. Not very, but the ones who take it seem to enjoy it. He bent to take a bite of risotto. But my mind caught on something else. You have degrees? I took a bite of the trout and it melted in my mouth. My stomach gurgled and I realized then how hungry I was. I followed the trout with a forkful of broccolini. We do, but it's an internal thing. It helps Arcturus to classify the mages who pass through our school. White wine? Basil put a hand on the neck of a bottle and a bucket of ice and poured white wine for himself and my dad. Tell me more about these degrees, I asked. We have 5 classifications. Simply, first, second, and third degree mages are those who have not passed through a burning. The first is untrained, the second has some training, and the third has mastered some kind of specialty. What's the difference between 4th and 5th? I asked. Basil put the wine back in its ice bath. 4th degrees have passed through a burning, and so have the benefits of heightened power. The 5th is the highest classification we have, reserved for mages who have passed through a burning and are trained. Basil cleared his throat. I should make it clear that at Arcturus, we don't talk about anything above the 3rd degree with our students. Why not? Asked my father. We don't want to encourage mages to attempt burnings, so it's not something we want to glorify. At a questioning look from my dad, he added, Too many mages die that way. I glanced at my father, but he appeared stoic. I was grateful, not for the first time in the day, that my mother hadn't come with us. So how would Saxony fit in at Arcturus, then? My dad asked, looking confused. If you don't talk about anything over 3rd degree, and she's been through a burning, Saxony would be a special case, said Basil. Wait. My dad sat back in his chair. How many students have you trained that have passed through a burning? None, said Basil simply, picking up his wineglass. He took a sip and set it down. Saxony would be the first student ever at Arcturus to be at this level. You're a 5th degree? My father guessed. That's right, Basil replied. But please remember that this classification is something I had to give myself. There's no third party who does this, that I know of. I don't mean to sound arrogant, but I am the most powerful mage I know. He shrugged. There may be other mages out there who are more powerful than I am. In fact, I would bet on it. But where Saxony is concerned, there is no one better to coach your daughter than myself, and the 2 other staff members I have here who are both 3rd degree. So Saxony is higher than your instructors according to the way you rate them, Dad observed. How would they be able to train her then? They have some specialties that they could teach Saxony, but for the most part, he looked at me, I would train you personally. My dad asked, how will the other students feel about having her here? It's hard to say, as I've never taken a student like Saxony. She would require one-on-one coaching, so she wouldn't be in so many classes with other students. Basil frowned. It might require some sensitivity, but I'm confident we can make Saxony and the other students comfortable, in spite of the gap between them. They may even look up to Saxony, see her as a prodigy to respect. I wasn't sure if Basil believed these words, and my tummy did a little flip at the idea of being with a bunch of other mages my age. It followed with a tumble at the thought of leaving my friends behind for my last year of high school. I frowned. It was a steep price to pay, but maybe I could go home for Christmas. How many students do you have? I asked. We had 4 last year, said Basil. We have 2 new students coming in this year, and if you join us, that will make for 7. Who are the new students? I asked. I'm afraid I can't say more than that. Student files are confidential. He gave me an apologetic look.
But you'll meet them if you join us.
Dad's back straightened.
I thought you didn't take minors. Are we talking about this year or next year?
Ah,
yes.
Basil set his fork down, then patted his mouth with his napkin.
That brings me to my proposition. I have never taken anyone under 18 before, but Saxony is such an exception that I would be willing to bend the rules. Mr. Cagney, I sincerely believe that Arcturus is the right place for your daughter at this point in her life. I realize she is young, but she seems very mature for her age, and I can tell you that as a mage—
He leaned forward with a look of emphasis.
She is exceptional.
My dad's spine straightened a little. Warmth filled me upon seeing this, for I recognized it as pride in me. Basil continued,
If you are willing and you agree with me that the sooner she gets her mage education, the better, I would like to invite her to join Arcturus this year. I would not charge any tuition, only living expenses. Consider it a full ride, as they say in North America.
He held up a hand.
You don't need to decide right this minute. Take your time to think about it. Please also take into consideration that I have tutors on staff who will follow any syllabus you require, so that Saxony can finish her high school credits without interruption.
A torrent of conflicting emotions and observations went through me. One was the sinking in of the very real possibility that I would have to say goodbye to my friends before I was quite ready to. The other was the feeling that I should have the right to make this decision for myself, in spite of being legally underage. What did the law know about my state? Did governments even know that supernaturals like me existed? I had no idea, but I most certainly felt that this particular legal restriction shouldn't apply to me. If we couldn't convince my mom to let me go, then she and I would go head to head, and that might make for a permanent rift. I deeply hoped that that wouldn't be the outcome here, but I was braced for it.
There is something else you should consider,
Basil added.
What's that?
Dad leaned forward on one elbow.
Saxony may prove to be so advanced that she learns everything I can teach her in a matter of half a year. Who knows? This commitment doesn't have to be years long. Do you have any documentation about what you plan to teach my daughter? Dad asked. Any certifications you have that say you can do what you're doing?
Basil was unruffled.
I would be happy to give you course descriptions, though they'll seem awfully strange to you, I'm sure. As for accreditation, well, we are a top-secret branch of SIS. British intelligence.
Dad ran a hand over his mouth.
You answer to MI6?
Basil shook his head.
We don't answer to them, but they know about Arcturus. The only reason they don't try to dismantle my program is because they like to recruit from among our students, and they are unqualified to do what I do.
He frowned.
We have a tenuous relationship that has held for years.
My dad was quiet for a while.
Do you have children, Mr. Chaplin?
He asked finally.
Not anymore,
Basil said. My dad blinked and sat back, his mouth grim.
I had a daughter,
Basil went on.
Dara. I started Arcturus for lots of reasons, but Dara is chief among them.
He spoke without self-pity, and my admiration for him went up another couple of notches.
She would be 27 today had she survived, he added. The fire took her when she was 7, and I couldn't do the only thing that would have saved her. I'm so sorry, said my father. What would have saved her? Having her pass on the fire to someone else near the moment of death. Anyway,
Basil put up his hands to signal he didn't want to say more.
I do understand what it's like to have a child with the fire, better than you think. I'll respect any decision you make.
He put his hands flat on the table on either side of his plate.
Perhaps it's time to let you rest, and I know you might wish to call Mrs. Cagney. It's been a long journey, and this has been quite a paradigm shift for you. I do have some business to attend to this afternoon. Please feel free to roam the grounds, explore the manor as you wish. Sleep, talk, make a list of questions. Do whatever you like.
He smiled reassuringly at both of us.
We can meet again for supper.
Chapter 12. After lunch, my dad and I went upstairs. "Are you going to call Mom?" I asked at the top of the stairs. "What do you think?"
What do you think, Saxony? Are you ready for this?
"More than ready," I said.
What about leaving the girls behind? Your friends? You won't know anyone here."
"It will suck to say goodbye," I answered truthfully. "But this is too important to pass up. Don't you think?" He nodded.
"I do."
"What do you think Mom is going to say?"
He put a hand on my shoulder.
"Leave your mother to me."
I let out a long, pent-up breath and went into my room. I lay on my bed for a time, tossing and turning. I finally got up and made my way downstairs and out into the backyard. There were multiple dirt paths crisscrossing the hilly property and leading down to the ocean. Listening to the waves in the distance and the gulls crying out soothed me. If I closed my eyes, I could almost pretend I was home. I followed a trail all the way down to the rocky shoreline and stood where the grasses met the pebbly shore. In the distance, I could make out a line on the horizon. I squinted at it, but it was mostly lost in cloud. I called on my fire to sharpen my vision, the way I had earlier, and as my eyes grew hot, the land across the water came into better focus. "That's France," said a voice. I turned to see Susan, Basil's chef, approaching from along the grass line.
"Yeah?"
"Yes, a port town called Calais." She came to stand near me. "This is the narrowest part of the English Channel, and on a clear day the French can see the white cliffs of Dover. It was a particularly welcoming sight during the war. The soldiers coming home from Dunkirk wrote songs about seeing those cliffs and knowing they were almost home." The wind blew the hair off my shoulders. It smelled of salt.
"What makes them white?"
"They're made of chalk," she said. "It's sort of amazing that they haven't all crumbled into the sea by now. Every once in a while a piece breaks off, so I guess it's only a matter of time. Are you going to see them while you're here?"
"Dad is going to ask Pete if he can take us by the cliffs on our way back to the airport. We're so close that it would be silly not to," I said. "Have you lived here your whole life?"
"Ha!" She shook her head. "I grew up in London, the Whitechapel area. I was on a downward spiral when I met Basil. Not sure what I would have done without that man. I probably wouldn't be alive."
She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear and looked out to sea. I noticed a network of scars on the side of her neck that I hadn't seen the first time I met her. I was screwing up the courage to ask her what had happened and if she was in a relationship with Basil when she asked,
"What was it like?"
The question was so soft, almost lost on the wind. But I knew exactly what she was asking about. My forced burning.
"It's okay if you don't want to talk about it," she added when my answer didn't come right away.
"No, that's okay," I said. "I'm not sensitive about it."
"It was awful. Truly, truly awful. I wouldn't wish that pain on my worst enemy." The wind blew my own thick curls into my face, and I pulled them to the side and held them there.
"It's the only time in my life I wished for death. Imagine being a roast pig, cooking for a full day, but without dying."
She looked appropriately horrified, but she also narrowed her eyes a little, like she wasn't sure she believed me fully. "Was it worth it?" I hesitated again. I began to get a sense of what a slippery slope this could be. If I said yes, it might encourage Susan to attempt her own burning. I also sensed how an unburned mage might suspect that the burned ones would be motivated to keep the truth hidden, to give themselves a leg up, make themselves more powerful. There was no way this type of difference wouldn't cause some kind of divide between mages. Truthfully, it had been worth it because I no longer had to deal with the pain on a daily basis, but it was only worth it now that it was over.
"No," I said finally. "I'll just say that if I had to do it over again, knowing what I know now, I would never choose it. The everyday pain wasn't so bad that I couldn't live with it."
She said, and shoved her hands into the pockets of her jeans. Feeling like I hadn't convinced her, and suddenly nervous that Basil might hear about this conversation, I added, "If I had gone into the burning knowingly, aware of the change that would occur, and there had been water nearby, I would not have cared. I would have drunk the water to stop the agony. I don't think there is a person on earth who could withstand that kind of torture willingly." "Well, of course not," she huffed. "That's why mages get themselves locked up, so that they can't thwart the process. They would just have to start it all over again."
"There's more to it than that. From what I understand, there is only a tiny window of time to give water. A few minutes this or that side of it, and you'll fail.
She nodded.
Yes. Basil says the window can be less than 15 minutes. He's told you a lot about this?
She gave a humorless laugh.
Not because he wanted to, but because I asked. It's natural for a mage to need to know more about it. It's one of the hardest parts of his job, educating the mages who come here, and discouraging them from wanting to take their skills to the next level. Arcturus is the strangest association you'll ever come across. We fell silent and stood there in the wind for a time, watching the waves. Don't waste it, Saxony, Susan said abruptly. What do you mean? I mean that you survived for a reason. Basil says that the percentage of mages who survive a burning is less than 2%. She turned her shoulders square to me, took her hands out of her pockets, and crossed her arms. Basil is the best man I know, mage or no mage, and he's offering to give you his personal time to make you the best you can be. If you say no to that, you're an idiot. He's never done that for anyone before. He's a busy man. She looked down at her feet. I kind of can't believe he's even offering you this. Just. She brushed away the hair blowing in her face. Don't throw it away. I frowned. I don't intend to, Susan. She nodded once, then walked back up the bluff and around the corner of the manor, disappearing from my sight. On my own way back up to the manor, my phone rang. I pulled it out of my pocket and saw Jack's name on the screen. Jack? I answered, breathless. Is it really you? I thought you might have run away and joined the circus or something, just to avoid me.
Ha ha, Jack said. It's me.
You sound normal, I answered, head perking up, like you don't think I'm the devil anymore.
I walked up over the sandy bank and onto the grass behind the manor. There was an audible sigh. I owe you an apology, Jack said.
Excusez-moi? My heart felt instantly lighter.
I'm sorry. I was wrong about you.
You don't think I'm the arsonist anymore?
I know you're not.
How do you know?
Because there was another fire last night? I stopped walking.
No. Where?
You know that little antique shop down on the corner of Pepper and 7th?
Radar Antiques? It's been there since before we were born.
Yeah, that one. Radar. It was burned to the ground last night. Police are saying it's the same arsonist as the playground on the yacht.
My mind immediately went to Gage. Was this Callista, his brother's ex, at work? Why would she burn the antique shop? Was anyone hurt?
The house behind the shop, across the alley, their roof caught fire, but the fire department managed to put it out before the damage got too bad. It's fixable. The little old lady who lives there went to the hospital for smoke inhalation, but no one was seriously hurt.
I frowned. It's only a matter of time, though.
Yeah, he agreed. Seems like whoever is doing it is lighting bigger and bigger stuff. How long before they burn down a house with people inside?
I heard him breathing into the mouthpiece, and it sounded like wind.
Is there?
I waited, but when he didn't continue, I said, What, Jack?
Something we could do about it?
We?
I had already been considering whether I should involve myself, against what I knew would be Basil's directive.
You mean me? Because I'm a fire mage?
Yeah, I guess.
Maybe. I closed my eyes. Was I really thinking of taking this situation into my own hands? I knew what Basil would say. I knew what my parents would say, and I knew what the police would say. But what did my conscience say? I don't know, Jack, but thanks for telling me about it. Dad and I will be home soon.
Okay. Sorry again, Saxony. I was wrong.
I smiled. Thanks.
Let's just put it behind us. Sounds good to me. See you tomorrow.
I hung up the phone and looked at it, chewing my lip. I pounded out a text to Gage. Me. Are you connected with Radar Antiques? Several seconds later, my phone rang. Hey, I answered. Yes, came Gage's voice. It was rough. Stressed.
Radar was my mom's business, and my grandfather's before her. That store was in our family for 40 years.
I'm so sorry, Gage. I squeezed my eyes shut. Gage's family had lost their livelihood. I could only hope the store wasn't their only source of income. Was this her? Callista?
I think so. His voice trembled with anger.
Have you talked to the police?
We had to. They've been asking us questions all day. My dad is livid. He's got a temper at the best of times, but I've never seen him like this. And my brother.
He cleared his throat.
He had to tell them about Callista, but as soon as he was finished making his statement, he left. Just vanished. He hasn't been answering my calls.
His voice went soft.
I know what he's doing.
What's he doing?
He wants to catch her before they do.
And do what?
But the goose flesh was already rising on my body. I don't know. His words whooshed out on a breath, but it won't be good. It's not good.
Do you have any idea where she is?
None. Wherever she is, she'll be hiding where there aren't a lot of people. She's got to know the police are onto her now, along with Ryan, my brother.
I'm so sorry, Gage. Please let me know if there is anything I can do.
I could lay it out there that I was prepared to help, but Gage didn't know that fire was in my wheelhouse. The more I thought about it, the more I felt that it might be my responsibility to do something. But what?
Thanks, Saxony. I'll look forward to hanging out with you when all this blows over, he said.
Yeah.
But if I got my way, I wouldn't be in Saltford much longer. Gage was just another cute guy who would pass through my life like a summer breeze through an open window.
Your family. Are you going to be okay?
Yeah, we'll pick up the pieces. Mom had a huge insurance policy on the store because it was full of expensive stuff. She's a scrapper. She's already scoping for real estate and planning buying trips.
I smiled. That's good. It'll give her something to focus on. In the meantime, let the police do their job. They're bound to catch Callista.
He chuckled, but his words were bitter.
If my brother doesn't catch her first and do something stupid.
Chapter 13. The exhaustion of 2 international flights within 3 days caught up to me in the van on the way home. I fell asleep in the back seat within minutes of pulling out of the airport parking lot. Once we reached the house, it was all I could do to drag myself up to my room and collapse on my bed. But the downside of falling into bed before dinner time was waking up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at 4 a.m. I opened my eyes in a dark room, on top of my covers and still wearing my clothes. I rolled off my bed, stood up, and stretched. My room was stuffy and hot. I went to open my window, tripping over my suitcase. I cranked the metal handle on my window and the hinges creaked as it opened. The smell of smoke came in on the breeze and I inhaled more deeply, growing alarmed. The sky was dark, there was no sign of flickering light anywhere, but there was definitely fire somewhere outside. I took another sniff. It didn't have the scent of burning leaves or bonfire. It had the more acrid and rank smell of burning garbage. I grabbed my phone and stuffed it in my shirt pocket. I took an elastic from my bedside table and raked my hair up into a ponytail as I padded silently down the stairs. The house was quiet. Everyone asleep. I went into the kitchen to look out the large picture window. The backyard and beyond were also in darkness. I went to the foyer and jammed my feet in my sneakers, then went out onto the porch. The night air was alternately sweet and humid, and then stinking of smoke as the wind shifted. I scanned the street as I went down our front walk to the sidewalk. There was still no sign of light or life anywhere. All the houses were dark. Where there is smoke, there's fire. So where's the fire? I wandered down the sidewalk. There was no moon in the sky, and the only light came from the street lamps along our street, illuminating circles of pavement, grass, and parked cars. I passed the narrow alley that led to the park, and beyond that, a large patch of forest where the old McLeach farmhouse stood. That's when I finally caught the sight of flickering light. It was faint, and a smudge of smoke above it blocked out some of the stars. I chewed my lip, weighing my options. Finally, I began to jog down the alleyway. I passed through the park and into the bush. The smell of smoke grew stronger. I took out my phone and dialed 911. When the voice on the other end of the phone asked what my emergency was, I said, "One of the abandoned buildings in Swallowtail Park is on fire." "Is there anyone else inside the building?" asked the woman on the other end. "I don't know, but I doubt it," I said. "Those buildings have been boarded up for years." "Where are you?" "I'm in the park. I woke to the smell of smoke.
I live in the suburb of Swallowtail. Are you anywhere near the building? No, but I can see that it's burning from the light and the smoke. Okay, good. She took my name and phone number and told me to go home, and that the police and fire department were on their way. I ended the call and stood on the path leading toward the old McLeach farmhouse, hesitating. What was my responsibility here? Did I have any at all? I was a fire elemental, so what did that mean when I was faced with an actual fire? I was standing there deliberating when I heard the high sound of female laughter. Or was it crying? My ears perked. It was coming from the same direction as the farmhouse. Was there someone in the building after all? My feet moved of their own accord, down the path and toward the rear of the old farmhouse. The fire was in full view now, licking up through the gaping windows of the top floor. That strange keening sound came again, and my hair stood on end all over my scalp. I'd never heard a sound like it. My heart throbbed as I approached the backyard of the house. An old falling-down wooden fence half wrapped itself around the yard, and I stepped over the rails lying in the undergrowth. Long stalks of grass brushed against my shins. I stopped when I heard the sound again. This time I thought for sure it was not laughter. Someone was crying, and it was coming through the windows from inside the house. My mouth went dry as powder at the thought of someone inside. How had they even gotten in there? The boards covering one of the upper windows caught fire, and the crying sound stopped. I ran toward the house and skidded to a halt just outside the back deck. I looked down at myself. If I went inside, my clothing would almost definitely go up in flames, and then what? The fire department would catch an unsinged, naked redhead scampering away from a no longer burning building? Perhaps dragging a person out of the building? For a breath, I felt completely paralyzed. What to do? There was someone inside. I was the only person here. I was a fire mage. Time was running out. Was this fire also lit by Callista? Was that her voice? I glanced around, my nerves screaming at me to do something. I stopped thinking and just moved. It felt like I would imagine bungee jumping might feel. At a certain point, you have to stop deliberating and jump. I stripped off my clothes and stuffed them under a bush. I called my inner fire to life. The familiar liquid heat rolled up and down my spine, promising power. My mage thoughts concluded that the best way to walk into a burning building naked was to become part of the fire, so I lifted my right hand and ignited a blue ball of flame, then allowed it to dwindle and become red. My eyes trailed up my forearm and the flames followed my vision, up to the crook of my elbow and beyond. When the fire hit my shoulder, I closed my eyes. With a sound like hot, dry wind, I ignited my entire frame. I became a human torch, blazing with flames shooting skyward from the top of my head and shoulders. I pulled off the boards covering the back door of the house and stepped through the gap, scanning for signs of life. The heat that greeted me inside was intense. The air was full of cinders as dirty flames licked up the doorposts, across the lintels and along floorboards. Furniture blazed in smaller bonfires, crackling and snapping. Though the heat around me would have cooked another human, it was nothing compared to the heat inside me. It was a new feeling to have every inch of my flesh, every limb ignited. My fire cracked happily and seemed to want to elevate itself, become even hotter. I held it steady, my abdominal walls trembling slightly. I crossed what used to be the living room and entered the kitchen, peering around. An exposed beam dropped partially from the ceiling with a loud creak. It was when I passed from the kitchen to the front foyer of the house that I saw her. The sound of sirens in the distance barely penetrated my consciousness as I stared at the woman. She was kneeling just inside the open front door. Her hair was so short that it looked like it had been shorn only a few weeks earlier. Her palms were up and her head was tilted back, and she was looking up the stairs at the flames that could be seen through the stairwell, licking along the spindles. She was sweating, and her eyes were glassy and wide. I was so shocked by the sight of her that I froze at the end of the hall. I received a double dose of shock when my eyes zoned in on the mage tattoo on the soft part of her shoulder. It was obviously not real. It was too big and too stylized to be a real mage mark. Where had she come across the symbol of my kind? The flames of my own body made a fiery wall of heat in front of my vision as I stared at the kneeling woman who had to be Callista. The strangest sight came through to me.
Overlaid against her face and head was black and white fuzzy static, like the snow on an old TV that wasn't working. I took a step back and squeezed my eyes shut. But when I opened them, the static was still there. That strange keening sound came from her throat and jolted me back to life. We both had to get out of here. "Hey! Callista!" I walked toward her, half forgetting that I was a flaming apparition. "You have to get out of here." "What are you doing?" Her strange eyes fell from the upper floor to me and widened. Her mouth opened in a huge O, and her hands flew to the sides of her face. The static overlaying her head hadn't gone away. It was then that I saw the can of fuel and the lighter on the floorboards beside her. Despite her shock at seeing me, she wasn't moving, wasn't getting up. "Please, get up," I said. When she didn't respond, I closed the gap between us and reached for her, dousing my fire from my hands and arms. "Callista." My voice sounded strange even to me, breathy and hissing on the S. At the sound of my voice saying her name and the sight of fleshly arms reaching from a flaming body, Callista screamed and jerked to her feet. Then she stumbled backward through the open farmhouse door, screaming all the while. The lights of trucks and cars, sirens screaming and lights spinning, came flashing through the trees down the fire road that led through the park. Callista had fallen onto her back on the lawn and was propped up on her elbows, staring at me, terrified. My body was still ignited, and I couldn't even imagine what I must have looked like to her. A burning body? A walking inferno? As the police and fire vehicles halted just beyond the trees in the front yard, and the voices of people shouting commands reached my ears, I turned and bolted back through the house. My rescue mission had gone in a very unexpected direction, but at least Callista was out of the house and safe. She'd clearly lit the fire, and there was nowhere for her to go. I flew out the back door and made a mad dash for my clothes. I hadn't any fear about walking into a burning building, but the fear of the police or fire department catching me made my knees feel weak. I put my flames out and yanked on my clothes, breathless and feeling more than a little ridiculous. Chapter 14. I was crawling through the evergreen trees at the back of the overgrown yard, pulling my t-shirt down over my hips, when a surprised voice said,
"What are you doing here?"
I stood up so fast that I smacked my head on a tree branch and a bunch of dry needles showered down on me. A shadowy figure materialized just past the post of the old fence. I narrowed my eyes and took a few steps closer, rubbing the top of my head. He had his arms crossed over his chest and his short hair was combed back. He wore a black zip-up hoodie with black jeans. I probably wouldn't have seen him if he hadn't spoken, the way he was camouflaged in the shadows. Something about his face was familiar. The wind blew the cloud cover away from the moon, and its cool blue light helped bring his features into focus. My eyes widened. "Gage? What are you doing here? You scared the crap out of me." I walked closer to him, my heart pounding, not just from the startle, but from the fact that I didn't know how much he'd seen. He dropped his crossed arms and the gesture struck me as surprised. At first, he didn't answer. I thought for a second that maybe I'd remembered his name wrong. But no, I hadn't. It was too unique a name to forget.
"Where did you meet my brother?"
His voice seemed heavy with suspicion. Of what, I didn't know. I blinked as the puzzle fell into place. "At the soccer game less than a week ago. You must be Ryan. Gage didn't mention that you were twins." I stopped a few paces away and observed him in the moonlight. His features really were identical to Gage's, but there was something a little bit different. In the poor light, I couldn't put my finger on what it was. He frowned and his eyes flashed to the burning building behind us.
"You're not the arsonist. So what were you doing inside that dump?"
He jerked his chin toward the burning house. The flashing lights of the sirens and the sounds of firemen working could be heard on the other side. His eyes widened.
"Did you see her?"
"Your ex, you mean?" I said. "Yes." He gave a quick intake of breath and then bolted toward me. I had a mere moment to react when I realized he was heading for the house and for Callista. I shot out an arm. My inner fire ignited inside my shoulder, elbow, and wrist, and I caught him across the chest, arresting his spring.
"What the?"
Ryan snapped.
"What are you doing?"
He tried to tear away from me, but I locked my fingers around his wrist, my grip as firm as iron, my arm hot. His eyes found mine.
shocked.
Let go.
The police have already caught her, Ryan, I said. You hear those sirens?
A frustrated frown crossed his face, making him ugly in the moonlight. But he relaxed. I released him.
Get out of here before someone sees you and thinks you had something to do with this.
I started jogging down the narrow trail. Ryan fell into step behind me. My heart had slowed its thunderous pounding, but something about Ryan made me feel on edge.
I'm sorry for what she put your family through, I said over my shoulder, but it's better to let the police handle it.
Ryan didn't answer, but I could hear his breath catch. In a hard voice, he asked,
What did my brother tell you?
Not much, I replied. Just that you broke up with her and she didn't handle it well.
It's better for her that the police caught her,
he said, his voice as cold as ice. The hair on my forearm stood up as I caught his expression. We slowed to a walk.
Why? What were you going to do with her?
I fought to keep my voice calm, but the desire to get away from this guy was mounting by the second. He gave off a completely different vibe from his twin. He shrugged.
Doesn't matter now.
He turned back and his cool eyes fell on me.
You still haven't said what you were doing in there.
He slowed down his words and lowered his voice.
Without your clothes. And how did you stop me like that?
My mind skittered for an excuse until I realized that I didn't have to tell this guy anything.
It's none of your business, I said coolly. I'm going to head home. Have a nice night.
He put a hand on my shoulder and stopped me from walking. Then he pulled me toward him. Take your hand off me, I said through clenched teeth, stepping back. The intent behind his touch reminded me so much of Dante that I shuddered. The idea of someone making my body do something I didn't want it to do just because he was bigger than me lit off anger inside me. I'd had my fill of forceful boys already in my life.
Okay, just chill,
he said, holding his palms up. That's when I saw it. A mage mark on the heel of his right hand where the skin of his palm met his wrist. It was a medium brown, dark enough to see in the moonlight.
You're a mage,
I blurted without thinking.
That's where Callista knows the symbol from.
My heart had started pounding again.
She's not a mage, but you are, and you gave up your secret. That's why you were so intent on catching her before the police did. Is she going to give you away?
His eyes went so big I could see the whites of them. He took a step back, and a flash of fear passed over his face. I watched him wrestle his shock under control. He hissed,
How do you know what I am?
I gave a sharp intake of breath, and my brain skittered over multiple things at once. Did I tell him I was one too? How could there be another mage in Saltford? Basil had said we were rare, so what were the odds of there being 2 of us in the same town? No, wait. 3.
Does Gage have the fire too?
I asked, rocked to my very core. Another thought crashed into my brain on the heels of the first few.
Are you the 2 new students at Arcturus?
His jaw dropped, and when the shock of being identified hadn't even yet passed, he looked even more astonished. He raked a hand through his hair, messing up its neat lines.
How do you?
Your mark gave you away,
I said, almost feeling sorry for him. His complexion had lightened a few shades, and in the moonlight he looked nearly vampiric. I probably didn't look far from it myself.
Do we have to worry about Callista spilling all kinds of mage secrets to the police?
He looked down at his wrist and then back up at me. Understanding began to dawn, finally, passing over his features like a sunrise. He looked at me with an entirely new expression. Respect. Delight.
You're a mage,
he said. He shook his head, staring at me, eyes wide.
Keep up, I snapped. Callista, is she a danger?
No, all right? No, he barked back. She won't spill. I wanted revenge more than anything.
His voice softened, and he shook his head.
I can't believe it. A 4th mage in Saltford.
He crinkled up his face in disbelief.
This has to be some kind of a record.
4, I said. You know of 2 more?
We got it from our dad, he explained. Actually 5, right? One of your parents also. Which parent did you get it from?
Neither, I said.
He cocked his head to the side, looking at me in disbelief.
You had to.
No, I didn't. The fire was imposed on me.
A chill wind blew over us just then, and as sure as I felt the hair lifting from my forehead, I felt a warning. I didn't want to tell Ryan my story. I couldn't explain why, but I shut my mouth and said nothing more.
How is that possible?
I turned away and began to walk toward home again. It just is, I said.
Can I see your mark?
He began to follow me, then caught up and walked beside me.
I'd rather not, I said. It's late. I'm exhausted. You should go home.
You saw mine. Turnabout is fair play.
His voice took on a wheedling tone.
I saw yours by accident, and I don't really care about what's fair,
I replied, keeping my tone as neutral as I could manage it.
What were you doing in that house? Were you trying to put out the fire? Because it takes a lot of skill to do that.
His words took on a slightly holier-than-thou tone.
How old were you when you got the fire then? I was born with it.
Good for you.
I kept walking, but as my street got closer, I realized that I didn't really want to lead Ryan to my home, so I crossed over my intersection and kept walking farther from home instead of closer. Now I had a different problem. Ryan showed no signs of leaving me alone.
How do you know Basil? He continued.
The more he pried, the less I wanted to answer his questions. I kept my mouth shut.
So you're the redhead that Gage was talking about? He said after I didn't answer. Can't imagine what he saw in you. You're stuck up.
Before the summer, those words would have riled me up, and I would have shot something hurtful and witty back at him. But thanks to my transformation, his words had no effect on me whatsoever.
Good night, Ryan,
I said calmly.
Come on, he said, his voice getting a notch louder. It's the first time I've ever met a mage other than my dad and my brother, and you don't want to talk about it? What, are you some kind of hero? Some kind of lone wolf? He sneered. Fighting crime at night with your superpowers, thinking you're better than everyone else?
Keep your voice down. We're in a suburb. People are trying to sleep.
My voice was calm, but my brain was whirring. He'd become a yappy dog nipping at my heels, and he wasn't showing signs of losing interest.
When are you heading to Arcturus?
I asked, giving myself a bit of time to think.
Next week, he answered. Are you going to be there?
I'll be there,
I said softly.
I guess we'll be schoolmates.
I looked over at him with a warning in my expression.
You don't seem to know how important secrecy is to our kind.
But not between our kind, he shot back. Your story is going to come out, Saxony. If I don't hear it from you, I'll hear it from Basil.
I laughed.
No, you won't. Student files are confidential. He'll never talk to you about me, just like he'd never talk to me about you.
He smirked at me, and for the first time in this encounter, I wanted to slap it off his face.
Yes, he will. Basil and my dad are old friends. He's my godfather.
That was interesting news, but I didn't give him the satisfaction of showing surprise.
Can you hear yourself? What is this, second grade? You basically just told me your godfather can't be trusted.
I raised my eyebrows.
Is that what you're telling me?
Ryan frowned and jammed his fists in his pockets like a petulant child.
Didn't think so, I said. Like I said, good night, Ryan. Go home.
He stayed in step, matching me stride for stride.
And if I don't?
I stopped dead. He stopped too. I turned to face him. He looked me in the eye and cocked an eyebrow as if to say, "What are you going to do about it?" I gave him a little smile, lit the flame in my gut, and let my eyes light up only briefly.
See you in Dover, Ryan.
Then I bolted down the street.
"Hey!"
he yelled behind me, and I heard him take off running. It sounded as if he was sprinting with real effort, trying to match me. I let him think he was catching up, and I heard him laugh, his breath coming faster now.
"That's so immature," he said. "Really? You're going to try to run away? You might as well just spill your secrets now. It would be easier than tiring yourself out. Or don't you know that boys can run faster than girls? I would have thought you learned that little lesson on the playground years ago."
That was my cue. I let the fire go off. Explosions of hot power went off in my joints in a natural sequence that I didn't even have to think about. Toe joints, ankles, knees, hips, shoulders, elbows. I accelerated so fast I felt the weight of my head on my neck as it resisted. My arms pumped and my legs moved like pistons, and my strides became unnaturally long. Ryan fell behind rapidly. I turned the corner up ahead and kept running. The blocks flew by in a blur, and I turned again, falling out of sight of my pursuer. I finally slowed to a walk when I arrived back at my block. I watched the end of the street ahead of me in case Ryan came back the way we'd gone, but there was no sign of him. I smiled as I let myself into the house. So Gage had an identical twin. They might be identical on the outside, but Ryan seemed absolutely nothing like Gage on the inside. Chapter 15 Instead of going back to sleep, I took a shower to wash the smell of smoke off my body and mulled over the events of the morning in my mind. The strange static I had seen in Callista's head while my body was lit. The fact that there were 3 more mages in Saltford alone. It all seemed too strange to be coincidental. After I got out of the shower and dressed and toweled off, I checked the clock on my bedside table. 5:26 a.m. I grabbed my phone and dialed Basil. It was after 9 there.
Saxony?
Came the familiar voice I liked so much. Hi, Mr. Chaplin. Do you have a minute?
Certainly, Saxony. Everything okay? Did you have a good flight home?
Yes, the flight was fine. I've just had a strange night, and I have a couple questions for you.
Fire away.
He paused.
Pun intended.
Cheesy, I said with a smile.
Just wait till I get going,
he replied, his voice full of mirth.
What's on your mind?
I never told you that we've had some problems in Saltford with an arsonist, I began.
Really? How curious.
Yes. Not anymore, because she was caught tonight.
Did you have anything to do with that?
Only a little, I lied, but I did happen to get a look at her. He was starting to sound mildly apprehensive. I happened to be... I took a breath and my heart had begun its pounding again. A light, when I saw her.
A light?
He sounded full-on alarmed now.
All of you? Entirely?
Yes.
Good heavens. Did she see you in this state?
Yes, but I'm not sure she'll remember me as human. More like a pair of hands reaching out from a flaming body. I heard a sound like skin slapping on skin. I asked, "Did you just do an actual facepalm?"
Yes. Yes, I did.
He sighed audibly.
I don't even know quite what to say to this recklessness, Saxony. Why did you do that? We talked about keeping your identity a secret.
She would never be able to pick me out of a lineup, I protested. And there won't be any more property going up in flames because of her.
That is not the point,
he began, and he sounded ruffled.
How the blast am I supposed to help you if you don't?
Have you ever lit yourself fully on fire before?
I cut off his now very heavily accented rant. I guessed he sounded even more English when he was angry. He paused. Yes, I have.
Did it change how you saw things?
He paused again. Why? What did you see?
I launched into the description of Callista, the look on her face before she saw me, the strange, glassy eyes, the ecstasy, and the strange static that overlaid her expression. It was like the snow that a TV screen shows when it's not receiving a signal, I said, moving and flickering just like that.
And it was only in her head. You didn't see it anywhere else in her.
The chastisement had passed out of his voice, and now he sounded like someone taking a statement from a witness. No, just her head and face. What was it? Do you know?
I have a suspicion,
he said after a moment's thought.
Obviously, I didn't see it, but based on your description, I'd suggest you were seeing some kind of mania.
I frowned. Mania? What do you mean?
I have reason to believe, although I haven't done any thorough experimentation with it, that when you ignite fully like that, it gives you a kind of vision, an understanding of what lies under the surface.
I thought of how I'd seen the bones in Basil's face when my eyes had been at their hottest. Like X-ray?
Yes, like X-ray, but not of material particle. Instead, it reveals emotional and spiritual makeup.
I let those words sink in.
Let me see if I can explain better. Arson is a criminal act, yes?
Yes.
It's a deliberate undertaking. To destroy property in that way for the purposes of looting or simple carnage takes a certain kind of immorality. If this girl you saw had that strange static over her heart, I might have suggested she was simply nefarious, a psychopath even. But you didn't see it over her heart. You saw it in her mind. Pyromania is a compulsive behavior. Individuals who suffer from it fail time and time again to resist the urge to deliberately set fire to things.
The result is the same. Loss of property? Even life, I replied.
Yes, I'm not excusing her behavior, simply pointing out the difference to you. It's just my best guess to explain what it is that you saw, based on my limited knowledge.
I thought about this. So she's a pyromaniac. She can't control herself. It's an illness.
If I'm right, Basil answered. Yes.
Why could I see it?
He sighed. I'm afraid I don't have all the answers, Saxony. We are supernaturals.
Not everything we do can be explained, I added.
He surprised me by saying, I disagree, actually. I think we can explain everything that we are capable of. Or rather, we will be able to when we have the right technology. We still have to operate within certain laws. We're just trying to figure out what those laws are, because clearly, they aren't the same ones that apply to naturals. As far as I'm aware, no one has done the work yet, aside from Arcturus. And we've only just scratched the surface.
The line went silent for a short time. I asked, do you think the police will take her mania into account?
I have no idea, Saxony. I suppose if they have a therapist assess her, they will discover it, and it could have some bearing on her case.
Is it curable?
Maybe. I've had occasion to study it a little. Given the nature of our own abilities, I thought it would be a good thing to know something about. Lighting fires induces euphoria in pyromaniacs, so I suppose it might not be dissimilar to breaking a drug addiction. Like any disorder, it will have a root cause, usually stemming from something in early childhood. A good therapist should be able to pinpoint that cause and prescribe treatment for it.
Maybe I should write a letter, I mused.
Excuse me?
Anonymously. To the police, just to ask them to get her tested.
He was quiet for a moment. I'm not sure that's a good idea, even anonymously.
Why not? They'd never link it to me.
Did anyone see you there?
Crap. I closed my eyes. Yes.
Bloody hell, Saxony, he said passionately. Then, sorry. But why didn't you mention that little fact sooner? It didn't strike you as important?
I was going to tell you. I just hadn't got that far yet. I took a quick breath. You weren't able to tell me that the 2 new students you have joining Arcturus this year are from Saltford.
Silence. Then, you've got to be joking.
I'm not. Ryan saw me.
What on earth was he doing there? Basil's voice was full of frustration. I could only imagine what he was thinking about what kind of trouble all of us irresponsible teenagers were going to be when we arrived on his doorstep.
He said you're his godfather.
I am, he answered without any hesitation. His father and I have a long history.
And you're Gage's godfather too?
Gage was there also. His voice was now laced with incredulity.
No, he wasn't there. I met Gage at a soccer game before I ever talked to you for the first time. Pretty weird coincidence.
I suppose the 3 of you have commiserated now, he said wryly.
Actually, no. I haven't seen Gage since before I met you in England, and Ryan and I, well, we didn't exactly commiserate. Dude is kind of a jerk.
I expected a smackdown, but what I got instead was, yes, I know. He takes after his father.
I spluttered a delighted laugh. Just when I thought I couldn't like you any more.
Don't be obsequious, he said with a sniff. I'm going to be your professor, and I don't play favorites. I closed my mouth and pressed my lips together, still with a smile. I wasn't even sure what obsequious meant, but I could probably take a stab in the dark.
Yes, sir.
I didn't buy the favorites line because I could feel Basil's affinity for me, but I wanted to show him respect.
Don't you think it's strange, though, that there are 4 mages in my small city alone?
Yes, he admitted. Yes, it is strange. And I can guarantee you it's not a coincidence. I no longer believe anything about the supernatural world is coincidental.
Me either, I said.
But that's enough for now, Basil said. You need to focus on getting yourself here and focusing on your studies.
Yes, sir, I said again.
Have I at least helped to put your mind at rest about what you saw?
I think so, I said. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Goodbye, Basil.
Talk to you soon, he replied. And Saxony?
Yeah?
Please, for the love of Pete, don't go around igniting yourself on fire or getting involved in petty crime. Don't write letters to the police, they can handle things. Please, he beseeched me. Just don't do things. I couldn't help but smile.
I won't.
Chapter 16. An hour later found me drinking coffee at the breakfast table, looking out over the smoky cloud hanging over the old barn in the park. The sound of footsteps on the stair made me turn. Jack came into the room, his hair spiking up all over the place.
I smiled. Morning, Jack. Hey. He gave me a shy smile. His eyes widened as they fell on the spindle of smoke in the park. His lips parted in surprise. She's been caught, I said. There won't be any more fires lit in Salford. At least not from her. His brows shot up. You helped? What did you do? Long story, I said. I'll tell you later. Let's talk about you instead. This morning is the first time you've smiled at me since the day I got home from Venice. Yeah. He wrapped his fingers around one wrist and twisted it nervously. Do you want to go for a walk? Absolutely, I said. I got up and put my coffee cup in the sink. So I guess your trip to England was good, Jack said as we entered the foyer. Yeah. Did Dad tell you anything about it? I'm sorry I didn't see you. I fell into bed as soon as I got home. I slid my feet into a pair of flats. That's fair, he murmured, bending to pull on a pair of sneakers. Jack and I went out the front door and closed it behind us. Jack scuffed his shoes along the pavement. Birds chirped in nearby trees, and a light breeze tugged at my hair. The soft light of dawn had graced the neighborhood, and the street lamps were flickering off. So what's been going on with you? I asked softly. Jack took a breath and jammed his hands into his pockets. I didn't have anything nearly so crazy happen to me as you did over the summer, but I kind of had my own weird development. I thought back to what Raph had said about his aunt. You can sense things about other people? He laughed. That's a mild way of putting it. All I can feel whenever I get within 10 feet of you is fire, fire, fire. Super hot, super bright, and noisy. He rocked his head side to side. And I could feel that you were hiding something, but I couldn't tell more than that. The fire started as soon as you got home. It just made so much sense to me. You had to be the arsonist. My mind caught on the most peculiar part of this admission. Wow, really? It's noisy? Yeah, standing near you sounds like a wind tunnel. It's as distracting as the heat. I was sure you had to be the arsonist. The sense of fire and the feeling that you were hiding something from everyone pretty much clinched it for me. He shrugged. I never would have guessed that you're a fire mage. Yeah, that, whatever that is. When did you first start noticing that you could feel things from other people? We crossed the grass toward the swing set. Actually, it was just before you left for Venice. He sat on a swing and I took the one beside him. The hinges squeaked as we swung back and forth, scraping our feet against the dirt. It wasn't as strong then, he continued, but one of the reasons I convinced Mom and Dad to let you go to Venice was because I could feel how sorry you were about hurting me. It made me take pity on you. I looked down at the hard, packed earth between my feet. An arrow of regret and shame sliced through me at the memory of what I had done. I had been so angry at Jack that night that I had thrown him out of his room. I hadn't meant for him to slip and hit the door jamb, but that's what happened. He'd cut his face and chipped a tooth. I'd never forgive myself for it. Don't feel that way, Jack said quietly. I gaped at him. What, you can read thoughts now? No, I can't read thoughts, but I can feel what you're feeling. You're still punishing yourself for it. I don't want that. He shifted on his swing like he was sitting on a thistle. I might have wanted it if I couldn't feel what's in your heart. We want people to feel sorry when they've hurt us, but it's... He struggled for the right words. His face looked so young under the park lights, and I was reminded that he was only 15. Out of proportion? I offered. He nodded enthusiastically. Yes, you get it. And how you feel makes me feel even worse. But you're the one who was hurt. You shouldn't feel worse. I know, it doesn't really make sense. But I could feel how much you're punishing yourself, how mad you are at yourself. I don't like it. I considered this. This new ability of yours, is it hard to live with? It's annoying as hell, he said with passion. He rubbed his face vigorously, making his cheeks pink. Don't you think it's weird that we both have these strange abilities now? I said. I mean, as a ratio of supernatural person to normal person in the world, you'd think the odds of two supernatural types ending up in one family were 0 to 0. You think my ability is supernatural? He blinked at me as though the thought had never occurred to him before. Of course it is. How many people do you know who can actually feel someone else's emotions? There were those who were more empathetic than others, but far as I knew,
The fact that Jack could feel my heat and hear my fire sent him rocketing way outside of normal.
Yeah, but what good is it? I can't make flames like you.
He gave me a lopsided grin. I laughed. I think your ability will turn out to be much more useful than mine in the long run.
I doubt it, he mumbled.
He wrapped his arms around the chains and clasped his hands in front of them.
It's hard to tell where my own feelings end and the other person's starts. That's why I had to leave the table that night that you told us what happened to you. I could feel Mom's heartbreak, RJ's amazement. He thinks it's really cool, by the way.
He shot me a side eye.
And he's kind of jealous.
Really? But my mind had caught on something else. Mom is heartbroken?
Yeah, of course.
He looked surprised that I didn't know this already.
You're not her little girl anymore. She feels like your future has been stolen from you. In a way, she feels like she's experiencing a death. Dad's really angry, or at least he was before you went to England. He came back feeling way better. He had some really violent feelings about what he would have done to Dante if he had been there.
He stopped suddenly, catching the horror on my face.
Sorry, Saxony.
My heart was pounding and I was gripping the cold chains tightly. My breathing had gone shallow. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath.
I shouldn't have said all of that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, I said. Better to know the reality. Do you think Mom will agree to let me go to England?
He nodded. Dad's already convinced her. They were up late last night. I could feel the conflict go like a heat wave through the house. I couldn't sleep until they came to an agreement.
But they did come to an agreement? We got up and began to head back towards home.
Jack peered over at me. They did. Looks like we have to say goodbye again.
I nodded. Yeah, I guess we do. I threw an arm over my brother's neck and kissed his forehead. I'm glad you're not mad at me anymore. When I released him, he rubbed his temple, looking pink and embarrassed.
Do that again and I will be.
Oh, whatever, I said, and shoved him sideways into a bush. That evening, Jack was sitting in the overstuffed armchair and I was curled up on the couch in our basement rec room listening to the popcorn maker going off in the kitchen above us. It was our family movie night, a tradition we'd had for as long as I could remember. Through the small windows in the top half of our basement, rain pelted the glass, and the wind whipped the leaves of the trees.
I've been thinking, maybe I should come with you to England, Jack said, tossing the remote up in the air and catching it.
Oh, yeah? Why's that?
Well, I'm probably a supernatural too. Maybe I should be getting trained also.
You're not a fire elemental, I smiled.
No, I'm not as cool as you, but I think I could have my uses, he said, dropping the remote and steepling his fingers. He smiled like an evil villain.
Like what?
I could be your sidekick. I can tell you how the other kids in your class feel about you. I can tell you who you shouldn't trust.
I put on a thoughtful face. On second thought, that could be very handy. I think you should come too. I'll call Basil in the morning and ask him if he's got a room you can have. Jack smiled. Slowly it faded. What?
You'll be gone soon, he said. You won't be here at all this school year.
I'll come home for visits.
He glanced at the stairs to where my parents' voices were drifting down from the kitchen. Yeah, but as soon as you get a taste of freedom, I just think you won't have a reason to come home. Not for good. Why would you? Of all the places in the world you could be, why would you come back to Saltford?
I blinked at this calculating suggestion and realized that he wasn't wrong. I had to reassess what I wanted for my future. It wasn't like I'd had a good grasp of what I wanted to be before I'd been given the fire, and now I had to evaluate it from an entirely different vantage point. Well, I began, it's not like you'll be here for much longer either. Another 3 years and you'll be facing uni or college, or whatever you decide.
He frowned. I don't like change.
I looked at my little brother. He'd changed so much in the last few years, it was difficult to imagine him hating it. A wave of nostalgia swept over me, and I realized that he was probably right. My days under my parents' roof were limited, and like most teenagers, I couldn't wait to spread my wings. But there was also something to be said for just being in the moment. Jack had always been good at that. He interrupted my thoughts with a change of topic.
When is your sleepover?
Saturday night, I replied. My stomach gave an excited flutter at the thought of it. I couldn't wait to get together with my friends and hear all about their summer adventures. As we heard Mom and Dad's footsteps coming down the stairs, Jack got off the chair and came to sit beside me on the couch. I raised my eyebrows at him. I thought I was too hot and too loud for you to sit beside. He gave me a sheepish grin.
The sound is kind of like white noise now, or a fireplace.
He shrugged.
I don't mind it.
Mom plopped down beside Jack with the overflowing popcorn bowl, and Dad sat down beside me.
RJ,
Dad called over his shoulder.
Coming.
He emerged from his room and plopped down in the chair Jack had just vacated. And the heat? I asked Jack, popping a few kernels of corn into my mouth.
It's cold in the basement, he said with a grin.
Oh, I see how it is, I said, laughing. I poked him in the side. You're just going to use me as your own personal space heater. Jack pulled the bowl of popcorn onto his lap and shoved a handful into his mouth.
Pretty much.
He crunched the kernels and said through his full mouth,
Are you going to tell your friends about your new superpower?
I frowned and stopped chewing. He'd just nailed the one question I had been avoiding answering for myself.
Of course she's not,
said Mom, as though he'd asked if I was planning to shave my head. She picked up the remote control.
You guys going to share the popcorn or what?
Asked RJ.
Growing man starving to death over here.
Mom handed him the bowl and pressed play. As the cheesy music began and the movie credits rolled, my dad said,
I think I've seen this. It looks old.
He took a bite of popcorn.
What are we watching?
Firestarter, said Jack with a lumpy, chipmunk-cheeked grin at me in the glow of our TV screen. I rolled my eyes and bounced a popcorn kernel off his forehead. Never putting you in charge of movie night again.